Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 6:01, so we will reconvene for our third night of budget meetings. So first of all, Madam Deputy Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mayor Patterson, we have quorum. All members of council are present. From staff, we have Lanny Hurdle, Chief Administrative Officer, Paige Agnew, Commissioner of Community Services, Craig Desjardins, Acting Commissioner of Corporate Services, Peter Hugenboss, Commissioner of Business, Environment and Projects, Brad Joyce, Commissioner of Transportation and Public Works, Desiree Kennedy, CFO and City Treasurer, John Bolognone, City Clerk, Luke Falwell, Director Engineering, Brandon Forrest, Director of Business, Real Estate and Environment, Lana Folds, Director of Financial Services, Karen Santucci, Director of Public Works and Solid Waste, Ian Semple, Director of Transportation Services, Lucretia Turner, Director of Recreation and Leisure Services, Mark Van Buren, Deputy Commissioner, Major Projects, Colin Wheaton, Director of Arts and Culture, Ryan Evoy, Acting Manager, Recreation Facilities, Scarlett Isles, Manager, Financial Planning, Jacqueline Grimman, Manager, Recreation Programs, Janet James, Deputy City Clerk, Julie Salter-Keene, Manager, Climate Leadership, Derek O'Shea is our committee clerk and meeting host tonight. Marcus Legacy is providing technical support, and we have our financial analyst team with us as well. And we have one delegation tonight from Joyce Austin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we do have an addendum for tonight to add a delegation, and then there is also a consent for an amendment to the budget as shown below. So I'm just wondering, can I get a mover and a seconder for please? Moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I, Ryan Bowen, with the Council Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 6.7 Agenda, Report Number 21-290. As an employee of Utilities Kingston, it may be received that I have a conflict with the Committee of the Whole Report 21-290 insofar as it may relate to Utilities Kingston and associated bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other disclosures? Yes, Deputy Mayor Oosterhoff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I, Gary Oosterhoff of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of the operating budget of Kingston Access Services, as I have a family member that uses these services. Thank you.
Councillor Neal.
I, Jim Neal of the Council of the City of Kingston, declare my potential pecuniary interest on the funding of the hospital. Should I be waiting till later for this? I see you nodding. I don't know if you're nodding.
So Councillor Neal, that is not in the city budget. So that is not.
Oh, it isn't. Okay.
We're going to be discussing or voting on tonight.
That explains why you were shaking your head at me. Thank you very much.
No problem. Sorry, any other disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, then we will move to our delegation this evening. So I will invite Joyce Austin to appear before council to speak to allotting budget to the neighborhood tree planting program. So Ms. Austin, welcome, and you have 5 minutes to speak, and then after that I will open it up to questions from council.
Yeah, it's a little more than the tree planting program, but thank you so much. I know you guys are so busy right now going through the budget. Just 2021, 2022, 1,000 city trees, 1,800 neighborhood watch trees, which is awesome. That's great that you've started that program. Next. And Little Forest Kingston, I'm coming on behalf of Little Forest Kingston, where we also planted saplings this year. Lakeside, Wolf Island, Champlain Park is still on hold, and Highway 15. And you can see the number of species, 49 species, 39 species, 42 species, 4 layers. So we took a much different approach to tree planting. Next. So in 2021, we planted 1,800 saplings for the urban forest. And so far for 2022, we have 900 in the works that are confirmed, and we are looking to confirm a few more locations. Next. this was one of the, we had lots of highlights from the planting, but this is a very community-driven project. And I think that's one of the important things that we want to bring up is the neighborhood program is targeted at citizens. And our approach is also very citizen-driven. So seeing more citizen-driven programming within the city. Next. What we don't know is how many trees were cut down in this past year and this past few years. So we have no idea how we're actually doing in terms of doubling our tree canopy or hitting any targets. And that's westwards, which is not too far from where I live. And there's been a lot of tree cutting there, for example. Next. And that's the tannery oak on the left. That's one of the little white oaks of many that we planted in the little forest, and one does not equal the other, 5 does not equal the other. Next. We need insight into age, location, health, and species in the status of the urban forest. This is City of Melbourne has a wonderful urban forestry strategy, and you can see a map, and you can see the colors on the map. So you can see like those juvenile, like the ones we just planted from the little forest versus the mature ones, the orange ones, like that tannery oak, and many unknown ones. So we don't have this level of insight into our forest. Next. And we don't have insight into tree equity. The reason we're looking at North Kingston is because we know they have lower tree canopy, and we're partnering with Queen's PhD Community Initiatives and Pathways to Education and community, and the community health, and around a program to start mapping the neighborhoods in the north so that we can build climate resilience. Next. So we need to audit and mapping to track how we're doing with the urban canopy and tree equity. And there's a Dutch urban forestry expert. And while I would like a higher target than 30%, this is very nice in terms of thinking each citizen should be able to see 3 trees from their window. There should be 30% tree cover in their neighborhood, and there should be no more than 300 meters to the nearest park. And Saanich City Council just endorsed this and adopted this as their urban forestry target. Next. So we need to prioritize the urban forest, and you see this is Melbourne's timeline on their forestry strategy. We are in a climate emergency, we have declared that, and yet we have not modified our strategy to take that into account. Next. And just City of Halifax has a really great video and some great documentation on the cost benefit of urban forest. For every $1, there's $8 of benefits. Next. I think I'm missing a slide. Next, that's not what I'm looking for. Next. Okay, here's our ask. So yeah, there's the videos embedded in the presentation. So if anybody wants to see that video, it's really worth watching. So the ask is a budget actually for an audit of canopy and tree equity score. So to budget for that, we need that. To double the target for the neighborhood tree planting program to 3,600. And if we're selling them at cost, I would imagine that the real budget is really around administration. So hopefully that wouldn't actually cost much more in the budget, but also diversify the species and the sizes. Sorry, am I out of time?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, and stop mowing to allow forest to naturally regenerate, which hopefully would save some money. And you'll see in Melbourne how many were naturally regenerated by not mowing, and then build a relationship with Little Forest Kingston to support us by fast tracking locations where we can plant that have low tree equity score. And we have the funds for the trees, we've raised that. So it's more partnership in terms of tracking, so some staff support.
That's great.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Councilor Neal.
Yes, first, what I always ask after a great presentation, if you could share through the clerks your slide deck complete, even those that we didn't get to, with the mayor and council, that would be great.
Yeah.
So, and I particularly appreciated your local focus on that. Are you familiar with the urban forest of Ontario Urban Forest Group? I've been to a couple of their conferences and they're excellent. Are you familiar with them at all?
I'm familiar with them, but I haven't been to one of their conferences. I really do need to go. Thank you, Tim.
They're well worth going to.
So Councillor, that was 2 questions for a delegation.
Okay. Thank you.
Next is Councillor Holt.
Thank you. Yeah, I just was looking for a little bit more information on the last slide, talked about the Little Forest project, and I know that there is one proposed for Champlain Park, and I thought maybe you could speak to that. That would be great.
Yeah, we had hoped for this 2021 to plant in Champlain Park 300 saplings, 100 square meters as part of the becoming an outdoor classroom for Kingston Secondary School. They're actually redoing the science curriculum for the grade 9 curriculum so that they can have and use the Little Forest as part of their learning. But yeah, I don't know if there's too much to say around it, is that the budget has been raised. So we have the support and the schools and on board. All we need is the go ahead from the city that and the partnership between the school board and the city, because the school board is looking for that long-term use of that park. I know there is some citizen concerns about the school itself. And I do know, I think somebody from the city had said that maybe planting the forest there would actually help with that relationship because it would provide some privacy for the residents. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's good. And well, I guess I did have another question just because of also the reference to tree equity. I'm familiar with the concept and you explained it well, but I guess if you could maybe speak to any benefits of beyond climate change and just the overall appearance of having trees in every neighborhood, what other benefits might we achieve with tree equity as an approach?
And I should mention also on Lion Street, the confirmed forest is the Addictions and Mental Health Services, 300 square meters there. And one of the reasons that they're super keen on it is sanctuary and healing. Your stress rate, your anxiety, I think it's within 10 minutes drops dramatically to be in that forest. The learning that happens in the forest, there is a school that's one of the schools has started a forest school, the grade 4 class in one of the Limestone District School Board schools. And they're actually with a PhD Community Initiatives programming, partnering on that to measure the focus of the students after being outside in the classroom, because their ability to pay attention goes way up. So that's another benefit. There's actually less traffic accidents. It's been demonstrated that there are fewer traffic accidents because when there's lots of trees, the cars slow down. And so in stormwater management, the trees absorb and slow down the stormwater. So in any areas where there's stormwater issues, and we can expect more and more of those, that can help mitigate by storing and slowing down the water and storing it in the ground in the trees. So those are just a few. I mean, there's so many benefits and reasons that we should be doing this. The cooling as the evapotranspiration of the leaves cool the air, and they filter out pollutants. And so in neighborhoods where there's pollution, and they also in Melbourne, well, in the Philippines, actually, they're planting their forests in such a way to slow down the winds. And so the wind then makes less wind tunnel effects and keeps the city cooler, but in our case, it could also keep it warmer in the winter. And it reduces air conditioning costs in the summer. So anything planted around in the proper areas of the building. So there's a few.
Great, thank you.
Next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, and also thanks for Little Forest Kingston for all of your hard work. There's no pressure with this question, but we are in a budget meeting, so I am going to ask if you have any knowledge of the kind of budget that an audit like this and a tree equity study would cost, and also if perhaps Little Forest Kingston would be willing to kind of help and volunteer with an audit like that. Not an audit study, inequity study.
Yes, we would definitely be willing to help with that. And that's part of what we're looking at with the PhD Community Initiatives Program. There's 6 PhD students helping with building a toolkit. So that also, especially the high school students we're looking at. So university students set it up, and then high school students do further mapping. I thought this was on the 30th and didn't realize until 3:30 it was tonight at 6. So I don't have the knowledge of how much actually it would cost. So that's something that I still would have to research. But yes, Little Forest Kingston is definitely interested and keen on partnering and helping with it. We have a growing number of members.
Excellent, thanks. My second question is, you said you were studying one area for tree and equity, but it was interesting when we door knocked for the election. It was a very, very hot summer. And I noticed in my district, there was very obvious actually tree inequity. So I just wondered if you could study other districts as well in other areas.
If I could, sorry, what?
If I guess this is not a budget question, so we should keep it to. I look forward to actually connecting with you after, and we'll keep it to budget. Thanks.
Okay.
Next is Councillor Sen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, a question to Ms. Hostin. Thanks so much for making the presentation tonight. So related to the budget, you're asking council to consider, instead of 1,800 neighborhood trees, to try to bump that up in 2022 to 3,600. Is that what I saw in the slides?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll make sure to ask that question when we get to the discussion later tonight. And also, my second question is more directed to staff, to your request for the tree canopy analysis and heat map. And I just wondered if Commissioner Joyce wanted to say something. And Commissioner Joyce, if you could also just I think in the motion, what was going to be in the motion, we did talk about a heat map, and just if staff could just keep that in mind, and if we can do it in-house or not. Thank you.
Councillor Senek, I'm just going to jump in here. So when we do delegations, we only ask questions of the delegation, and then we can ask questions of staff later on. So feel free to do that. But I will give you, if you have any other questions for the delegation, I'll allow you to answer or to ask those before I move on.
No, that's fine. I'll ask later on.
Okay, that's great. Next is Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if there's any way the clerks could put up, or whoever's controlling the slide deck, the deck that where you said was your ask, because I have a question related to what was on that slide. Thank you. Yes, so Councillor Sanik already addressed number 2 there. Number 3 is not an extra budget. In my interpretation, it does not require extra budget. Number 4 also does not require extra budget because that's about building a relationship. So really my question is about number 1. There was a question about how much that might cost, but the more focused question I would have is, do you have a suggestion for a budget amendment that would address number 1 from this slide?
You're asking the delegation for direction on the budget amendment? Yes,
I am.
Okay. I mean, Sasha, you're welcome to answer that, but I don't want you to feel that you have to be beyond the ask that you presented to council. If you have any further information, I'll provide that.
I mean, I wish I could, but I'm not prepared around that with the amount of time I had, and just because I haven't done this before. So
that's fine.
I would have liked to have.
Thank you.
Okay, so I take it from your response that you would like us to take a recess at some point during tonight's meeting and write a budget amendment that would address number 1 from your slide deck. Is that
That
correct?
would be wonderful if you were able to do that. Yes.
Okay, that's my 2 questions.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Theo, Your Worship. I really like this concept of Little Trees Kingston. In my youth, I was a Boy Scout and I planted hundreds of trees up in the Sudbury area. And when you fly in to the Sudbury Airport, you can see the growth of that forest today, and I'm still quite enamored by it. The opportunity for council members, is there anything that we can do to further support your initiative? Is there, like, are you a charity? Is there something that we can do? How do we get involved to support your efforts?
It's basically starting the conversation about, we had a meeting with the Pathways to Education and with the Kingston Community Health Center today. And it's like, how can we get policy in place? One of their questions to me, because I said I was going to present to the committee, is can we get policies in place over the next, can we have a 4-year target where we can ensure every neighborhood has that tree equity, where there are parks that have forests in them. So it would be starting the conversation with Little Forest Kingston about how to make that happen, what policies are blocking us, how do we ensure that when a new development goes in, that development includes the appropriate canopy and that it has like a potentially little forests around it, and that they are designed in such a way to mitigate the stormwater, to cool the area, so that those all get incorporated in it, but also to preserve and forest wherever possible during development as part of that. So it would be the start of that like ongoing relationship. We plan on being very, very active, and we have a lot of expertise and we're willing to do a lot of research. And so, yeah, it'd be more changing policies and priorities and allocating public space. So helping identify public space where this can happen, helping identify areas where we stop mowing to allow natural forests to regenerate, because that is a very inexpensive way of regenerating. So not just us planting, but also the natural regeneration. Does that answer?
It certainly does. And I encourage, I'll try to reach out to you afterwards, but I would certainly like to be more involved. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight. It's nice to know that there are residents like yourself taking such initiative.
Is there any other questions? Okay, Austin, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we'll move on in our agenda. So we are working our way through the departmental presentations. And so next up on our agenda is we'll invite Commissioner Hugenboss to present budget for Business, Environment and Projects Group. Commissioner Hugenboss, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and pleasure to be here on night 3, again, leading things off like last year. It's a pleasure. I'm here to present the Business, Environment and Projects Group. With me tonight is Director Brandon Forrest from Business, Real Estate and Environment and his team, as well as Julie Salter-Keene. She is the manager of our Climate Leadership Division. We have Colin Wigington, Director of Cultural Arts and Culture Services. We have Mark Van Buren from the Major Projects Office and Lucretia Turner, Director of Recreation and Leisure Services. So very happy with the effort and dedication of those folks and their respective teams. And also like to note Liz Cartwright in my office, who has been very supportive in putting this together and with the whole team. So thank you, and I'll move on to the next slide. So our total increase in budget is 1.48 across all departments, and I'll go into a little more detail as we go. But as you can see, the majority of the budget in this group is in the rec and leisure services, and it is going down this year. Last year was obviously very tough with the pandemic, and you heard from Treasurer Kennedy talk about our projections for revenues, and we're getting right back up there into near full projections in revenue for recreation and leisure services. So that's great, and that's reflected in a much better variance than we had last year in that group. Next slide, please. And from a capital budget perspective, a little bit of a different year, having the business real estate environment to sort of dominate this category with almost 11.3 million. The majority of this funding is what we talked about. I must have been last night. Apologies. I think Councillor Oosterhoff had asked about the investment in employment lands. And the majority of this is in employment lands, either acquiring new inventory, like we talked about at the council last week or the week before, and also investing in servicing and development for the Clogs Road property. So that's the bulk of that budget, and that's why it's there. Modest budget for the rest of the groups, as there are continue to be whips in those departments. We'll get into that as we go. Okay, so next slide, please. So let's start off with business real estate and environment. A key factor here in the 5.6.1% increase, which again is a relatively modest 44,000 when you're looking at the scale of the city's budget, and that is predominantly a new position, well, not even the total of the new position in our environment operations section. There are new regulations coming into effect January 2022, and a key role that our environment department has is supporting our departments across the city in construction efforts and managing excess soils. And there's new regs coming in. We need to have the proper skills and resources on the ground to manage that for our departments across the corporation. So there are many other things that go into the roles of those folks, the environment technologist team that works under Brody Richmond, some of you may know, but that's a key factor in this. And this was projected over the last couple of budgets, but it's taking effect here in 2022. Key highlights for the group, definitely the approval of Clogs Road and getting those land service for a key development, which we'll hear more about in the coming weeks and months. We did have the direction from council to fast track an employment land strategy review, which will be going into 2022. So we're excited about that work to increase the city's supply of employment lands. We do need to pursue strategic land acquisition opportunities for council. So there are funds there for that, both strategic and in the employment land sector. As I mentioned, we provide that ongoing support from the environment group. Whether it's known work, construction projects, and excess soils coming out of the ground, but also we respond to spills, and they can be both from our corporation or others that happen on city property. But it's a key role for that team. We do have to continue to manage our closed landfills across the city and administer the city's brownfields program under the expertise of Environment Director Paul McClatchy. Next slide, please. From a capital perspective, still working on getting the temporary excess soil facility on Creekford Road up and running. We continue to do groundwater monitoring, and we do have a number of active employment land sales in addition to the future work we'll be doing with Clogs Road and buying property. We continue to upgrade our parks and respond to the significant sales volume that we have, as you've heard recently. The new capital, again, is what I talked about with strategic land development and acquisition. Next slide, please. The Climate Leadership Division had a great year, and 2022 under Julie's group is really going to be about putting into action all the great work and all the great work that the council has seen and approved from the Better Homes Kingston program. That was formerly the Kingston Home Energy Retrofit program. So that one, if you recall, had a big budget ask last year, but most of it was grant funded through FCM. So we're very excited about that. There will be a report coming to council, or sorry, to EITP in December. I can't get into it tonight, but it should be a very positive report about that program. As you know, we asked FCM for $15 million in funding for that program. So we'll be able to provide more information to EITP in a few weeks. And so we're very, very excited about that. The climate leadership plan will be coming to council in December, which has been a great community effort and with stakeholder engagement, public engagement, and from adaptation and mitigation. So really excited about that. So Julie Salter-Keene and her team will be bringing that to council in December. And so we're very excited to launch that and have council endorse that. The annual promotion of the Kingston Climate Action Fund is something that really had a good first year last year, and looking forward to the new projects that will be announced very, very shortly. The Green Standard Community Improvement Plan, which is something that we've been to council at recently, and there's a budget increase, but that does not come into effect until 2023. But the program does launch in 2022. So we're very excited about that as well. We will continue to work closely with Sustainable Kingston. They're doing some great things, and they're going to be a key partner on the delivery of the Better Homes Kingston program. So we'll get more information about that at EITP in December. So again, happy with that relationship. And we will again be reporting our annual GHG inventories soon to council and committee as required. So modest increase overall in the climate leadership division. It's a small team, but as you've seen, I think over the years, doing some great things. And we have other things coming back to council with green burial motion and some information coming back in December as well. So next slide, please. From a capital budget perspective, that works in progress is pending the $15 million grant funding, and again, hope to share some news on that soon. The small ask relatively to that for 2022, working with Sustainable Kingston, update that hasn't been done over the last few years that has been deferred, as well as implementation of the climate leadership priorities from what you'll see when the climate leadership plan comes to council in a couple of weeks. Next slide, please. Arts and Culture Services under Colin Wigington does see an increase this year. Last year, it was a decrease because there were going to be projecting, unfortunately, not really any sort of shows at the Grand Theater and that sort of thing, although there still was lots of good work done in the community and in the funding that council provided to the recovery and resiliency funds for local arts and culture. But excited, happy to share with council. As you may know, the Alan Doyle performance last night at the Grand Theater was a full sellout. So it was our first full capacity event that we've had since before the pandemic. So hats off to Diane Zemba and her whole crew for doing such a great job to be ready to host that. It's been a really up and down time, as we all know. So they were very excited to welcome people back, and many people were there to enjoy themselves. So that's great. We have a great lineup for Grand on Stage for the coming year. So Jason Duggan's done a great job putting that together. So we're again, it's just so nice to be able to host these things again, and delivering our annual programs like Mayor's Arts Awards and YGK Music. A banner year for public art, as we're just coming off that in 2021, and we'll be continuing to implement that. But the three major installations have happened, and there'll be one launching tomorrow, as you may be aware, in the hub, and there'll be other ones, including a public-private partnership at 168 Division. So also happy that we launched the Arts Walk in 2021, which is the council's strategic priority, and is looking for an expanded program on that in 2022 and beyond. Next slide. And also, we'll continue to, the budget continues the city investment in our service level agreements and strategic partnerships with Kingston Arts Council and the Theatre Alliance and the Dance School of Drama and Music. What I know Colin and his team are very excited about is developing a music strategy for Kingston. This is identified in the council endorsed creative industry strategy. So the music strategy is great. And the whole creative industry strategy itself nurtures music, but also the film and theater sectors. And what we heard from Megan the other night was there's so much great film opportunities coming at Kingston. So it really is starting to package together quite nicely. We will be scoping the next phase of the overall municipal cultural planning for the city, and this is work that has been put off. The pandemic has hit this group hard, and I do want to again speak to this group's commitment to the corporation. I don't think any group in the corporation had more of its complement as a percentage of staff reassigned to different areas in the corporation because of the natural effect that the pandemic had on arts and culture. They lent themselves to vaccination clinics and to public works and to transit and to so many other areas. So again, just want to throw a shout out to them. It's so great to have everybody back and with that show we had last night. So a great group of people in this department. Next slide, please. From a capital perspective, lots of works in progress with the public art program and the asset management for the functional aspects of the operations of the Grand Theatre and JK Tet. There is support for the music strategy in WIPs as well as the Kingston Arts Fund review. We have a reduced amount for 2022 capital, so we can catch up on the works in progress related to public art and again, our facilities and that creative industries work that we have. So great stuff by Arts and Culture Services coming up. Next slide, please. In Recreation and Leisure Services, another really hard hit group, but one that was really needed to continue to provide their services over the last year and a half through many different ups and downs of legislation and requirements and guidelines. So hats off to this group. And as you can see from the budget I previously mentioned, we're seeing a great uptake and bookings of all our facilities in obviously right now, mostly in our hockey rinks, but also in our community centers and pools. So it's great to see people back and great to see those revenues back up, projected at about 95% of normal years. We will excited to reintroduce special event programming and supporting our municipal partners who also do events in the community. That's been a long time off from most of those events. It's great having an in-person Remembrance Day ceremony this year, and that really starts to kick things off, and then follow that with the Santa Claus parade with downtown Kingston. It's been great. We're really excited about the Kingston East Community Center, and I'm sure the whole community is, opening in January 2022. That we have some great partners there. Really happy that the city's marinas should be able to get back to full operations in 2022. We've had less boaters. We've seen a huge increase in slip renewals and new slip requests for boat slips, as well as just having access to our full facility and be able to open on time is expected in 2022, which is great because we haven't had that in the last 2 years. Another big opportunity there, which I remember we talked about last year at council, is our rent that we need to pay to the federal government, which they have recently advised us that they are in a position now to divest the Confederation Basin Marina water lots to the city for a nominal fee. And you'll be seeing a report to council soon. It may be in December, could very well be in early January, but either way, very good news. And that really frees up some opportunities for how the marinas can operate, because we no longer have that 20% gross revenue being paid in rent. So more on that to council, but that has been incorporated in the budget. So very excited there. We will continue now to provide year-round support of the Springer Market Square, all 4 seasons, and work with our local partners. And I think there's been a lot more activity in different different involvements down there, which has been great. We haven't included the reintroduction of the golf practice range service at Bell Park. This has not been there for the last 2 years, the pandemic. It is not likely to remain as part of the next phases or the first phases of the redevelopment of Bell Park as for the Bell Park master plan. So we haven't included to bring it back. It does provide a $79,000 savings by not reintroducing it. It is also does not mean the elimination of any staff, but we haven't seen any demand to bring that back, and we feel confident that this is the right move with where we're focusing on our operations. Next slide, please. A few more highlights from Recreation and Leisure Services. You may recall an info report, I believe it's info, but to committee on community gardens. We've added $25,000 to the community gardens budget to support them on a more critical costs. So this has been welcome news, and we're excited to support that venture. We're investing in the operations of the Tennis Clubs of Canada for the new indoor facilities. So that'll start in late 2022 and then go into full years beyond that. So that's a new program offering. That's new expense to the city, but it's fantastic to be able to offer the public indoor access as we talked about at council and not so long ago. So that's built into the budget. We do expect that we can explore a new recreational program at animating the waterfront down with the promenade projects. We're continuing to work on that with public engagement. And again, we talked about this, I think, at the last council meeting. So we are recommending no increase to the fees for arenas and sports fields. Sorry, we already have recommended and you have approved those rates and fees, but that's built into this budget. We will work with our partners in those sports groups to look at what level of service and what changes may need to be made there in 2022 and bring that back to committee. That was supposed to come to committee in 2021, but we deferred that. The groups were immensely busy, obviously, as you can appreciate, running their minor sports programs through all the different pandemic. And we thought it best to recommend to council, let's leave the fees alone for another year and come back when they have more time to actually speak about that, to look at where fees need to be adjusted. So that'll be coming back. Next slide, please. We have the Kingston East Community Center is wrapping up, so that's a big works in progress for us, and ongoing asset management of our arenas facilities across our corporation. We do have works in progress for the renovations that are underway at the Bay Ridge courts. That's for both tennis and pickleball, so that's great. New budget. We have new budget identified for outdoor fitness equipment, which is great. So we see that, and so that's an ongoing thing. But the first part can be implemented in 2022. So that's part of the master plan. So that's exciting stuff to have that. We have some CCTV work at a couple of facilities that we're working with FMCS, and a couple of bigger projects. And you'll have more information coming back to council soon, probably early in the new year, about what we can possibly do with the Kingston Memorial Center. As you may recall, we had an application a couple of years ago about a major renovation of the Memorial Center and what new uses we can bring to that site to really support the community. It's a great facility, but it was built in the 1940s for junior A hockey. And now what can we use that site for? Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful with that application, but the building isn't getting any younger. So we want to come back to council with some strategy on how we can partner with groups as well as engage with stakeholders in the community on that. So you'll see more on that, but similar to what we came to council, what council endorsed back in 2019. And we did mention this the other night. I think the Tours in Kingston brought it up, and Councillor Chaudier, you asked a couple questions on. So we have a budget request for cricket field, particularly the baseball diamond, the westernmost baseball diamond, the one closest to the hospital side. There's two baseball diamonds in City Park. So this baseball diamond is scheduled to host the 2024 National Little League World Series, which is a very big deal from a tourism perspective. It is the oldest baseball diamond in Ontario. It had a game played in 1872, so it's quite interesting. There's been baseball there longer than anywhere else in Ontario. And the ball diamond is actually a size for adults. The diamond is sized for adults, but the outfield is sized for kids. So if it's a full major league size infield. So if you had adults playing there, which we can't, balls are going to go everywhere to the courthouse, onto the street, parked cars, and that sort of thing. So there needs to be a reorientation of the field to keep balls away from pedestrians and parked cars and in the courthouse, and also a complete redo of the infield so that the bases are the actual length that kids need. We're talking 12 and under, maybe 13 and under, and that's all we book it for, because it's not safe to have adults play there, and it can never be safe because the space just isn't big enough. So so there's time until the 2024 Canadian Little League Championship. We're working with the engineering department because they're the ones that do a great job of engaging the public and designing new park renovations. So that will follow the complete public engagement process. But it's an exciting opportunity to right size this field for the programming that we see. So yes, it's a 1 week tournament done in 2024, but it's a legacy project to provide a diamond that's actually suited for the local need for many years to come. Next slide, please. I think this wraps it up here. The third crossing project is dominated in the major projects office, and 2022 is a huge milestone year for this department. So we're looking at seeing substantial completion of the bridge by the end of 2022. So very, very exciting stuff with that. So anyway, exciting times for 2022 for that project. Next slide. And again, there's no capital budget request in major projects. It's dominated by the current works in progress of $59 million left in the bridge, and the commissioner's office does see a variance. It had no variance last year. I stripped out everything, and there's no increases in last year, and we do see some new things put back in for 2022. And that is my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and happy to answer questions of council.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. You covered a lot of ground. You're a very diverse group. I appreciate that. Quick question, just for the benefit of people who perhaps don't follow it, that very substantial purchase of property. Our policy is that we service that property and we sell it, and therefore we recoup eventually that investment. That's accurate, isn't it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Neal, that's correct. So we are looking at a cost recovery model, a break-even model, to reinvest into more employment lands to keep that inventory going. So we have to buy the land, we have to sell the land, we have to carry the land, and when that happens, we put that money back in to service the debt that we bought the land for, and to end up buying additional lands to repeat the process. Yeah, so absolutely, it's not run off the tax base; it's run off an inventory model of our lands, buying and selling them.
I think it would be helpful in future, and whether this is done through an information report or perhaps at budget time, if we could see the revenues we've received from the sale of employment lands, because we can then more readily see the offset. If that's possible in future, that would be great.
That is possible, and we can target to do that in 2022.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. That was very good. It's actually really impressive. I really like the key highlights of everything that has taken place over the year. Everybody's been so busy and accomplished so much. So thanks to everyone. With our investment in climate change action, do we have any idea on return of investment? And I'm talking about like financial return, for example, jobs created or businesses that might have come to Kingston because of it. Are we keeping track of anything like that?
Good question, Councillor Doherty. I do not have that. I may ask Julie Salter-Keene, maybe just a comment on that from maybe a climate leadership plan perspective. But I think off the top of my head, that could be very difficult to track it at this stage of our climate leadership division. Although what we can provide to council early in 22 or at some point in 2022 is the number of investments that this council and maybe previous council has made in the climate portfolio, so to speak. But in order to equate that into jobs or sort of payback to the community, maybe more difficult. But Julie, if you had any comment, please step in. Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. To follow up on Commissioner Hugenboss, we are actually working with staff to compile that we can bring in early 2022 the investment of council on climate leadership initiatives over the last number of years. And with respect to the investment and number of jobs created, the only one that we've looked at was the Better Homes Kingston program that we had estimated that approximately 300 jobs would be created over the next 4 years in the implementation of that program. But it's certainly a good question, but that's the only one I can respond to.
Thanks for that. We are attracting other businesses to Kingston, so I'm interested. That might be part of the study. So it might the answer might be outside of the climate leadership group, perhaps. And my other question is related to, you said that there has been talk about revisioning the Memorial Center, and I was just wondering if staff talked about the Portsmouth Harbor.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Councillor. I meant to mention that in my talk about marinas, but I guess got a little overexcited with talking about this opening up and the slips we've sold. So yes, with Portsmouth Harbor, as council may recall that it was, I think, originally in the budget for demolition and redevelopment, I think starting in 2019 or 2020, and that was deferred for a couple of years as to reallocate and defer some capital spending to focus on affordable housing and road investment at the beginning of this council term. In the capital budget, and I believe it's actually in the facilities management's budget, as they're responsible for those types of projects, but it is a rec facility. We have pushed that out again, so that has been deferred another few years, I think, to start in 2025. So that's for a couple of reasons. One, we know our partners on the site, in particular Cork and other event organizers, have had a really rough couple of years. So to stick to the original timeline, or the amended original timeline of starting that in 2022 would give very limited time to get those partners back on their feet and providing those great events that they do. And secondly, so having a few years before that is slated makes a lot of sense to us, and that's what we're recommending to council in those projected capital budget. And secondly, Councillor Doherty, is we did bring a information report last council meeting with the unfortunate closure of the Harbour Restaurant at POH, but it does provide for a potential opportunity to use the commercial kitchen space at Portsmouth Harbour for some partnerships in the community for social enterprise and young entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, workforce development in the commercial kitchen space. And that is an opportunity I want to bring to council soon. Still working on partners, and that's what I said in that report. But it could be a great initiative there. And of course, it needs some time to develop, and so it seems to make sense to delay the demolition and redevelopment of that community facility. That said, we still are working at operating a most successful marina that we can. making upgrades where we can, and continuing to work with the federal government now that we got the decision from the Confederation Basin, which is so exciting and so valuable to the city. What do we have to do to get a similar decision for Portsmouth Harbor water lots as well?
Great, thanks.
Okay, next is Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Hugenboss, yes, excellent high-level presentation, very efficient, well appreciated. So I have a couple questions. First of all, it's great to hear that staff is making Cork a priority, Cork's recovery after the pandemic recovery. We all know how important that is to the community. But my questions are about, first of all, Cricket Field. So Cricket Field, you spoke to it. I have some specific questions just for concerns in the community. Will there be any changes to the parking around the field? At the moment, it's there's parallel parking or nose in or whatever you call it, parking on the gravel near the courthouse, and then there's those few spots along Bagot Street that cuts through the park. Is there any proposed, like in the infrastructure improvements for the Little League Championship? Is there anything proposed for on that aspect?
So it's early right now, but I'd say not particularly, Councillor Stroud. So right now it's the focus on the actual playing area and what needs to be done to make it safe and appropriate for kids and not size for adults and for balls flying in the wrong directions that can often do in baseball. So no, and then again, the project would go through public engagement. So if there's the potential to make improvements for that, but I would say definitely none of the project is about expanding parking or adding parking or doing anything like that, but there could be some operational improvements that could be considered for that area.
Okay, that's great. Yes, you were saying that for adults, an adult team to play baseball there, especially like a major league team, for example, if we had some of the guys like Guerrero and the Blue Jays hitting towards left field, which would be the courthouse, you could imagine some broken glass. But with Little League, I'm sure we'll be calculating what the longest home run ball of Little League might be, and that it might not hit not even the fountain, I guess, area of the courthouse, because that is where left field would be. And the other thing would be for the washrooms. So there's currently washrooms on the other side of Bagot by where the shinny rink is in the winter. Is there any proposed changes for that to accommodate a championship?
Thank you, Councillor Stroud, and through you, Mayor Patterson. I don't have every detail on the actual, like the 1 week event 3 years from now, and I'm not trying to be, no flippant about it. I know that having washrooms there is a plus. We have time to work on whether there needs to be additional, temporary washrooms for that, but from an ongoing perspective, having those washrooms there is definitely a positive for the programming in the park, both from an athletic perspective and from other things. If you're thinking more of needed upgrades, happy to talk to Commissioner Joyce about what could be done just outside of this actual project. If that makes sense. I'm not quite sure what.
Well, no, it just seems logical that any potential washroom upgrades might be scheduled prior to the Little League Championship. But you don't have information on that.
That's a good. I understand. It's a good point, though. Yeah, thank you.
There's, I mean, a lot of this could be done with just a meeting outside of budget time. It's just that this literally just appeared on Monday, right? On Tuesday, to me as a district councillor, and so now I'm fielding questions, so that's why I'm asking. Okay, so my other question is about the Memorial Center. So there was that, I guess it would have been a grant proposal that for a partnership for a new arena or something like that did not work out. But is staff still contemplating the historic rink building be demolished at that location?
So thank you, Councillor Stroud. Good question. So we want to bring back a more fulsome report before we do anything to council to talk about what feasibility work needs to happen to understand the structure so that we can understand what is possible in that envelope. We didn't have the luxury of time to fully understand that level of detail before taking advantage of the grant application opportunity back in 2019. That did come to council and report back in the fall of 2019. So I just wanted to highlight it to council to know that it's in the budget, but that there will be a report coming to council to say, here's the initial scope of what staff want to do. Does council endorse that in order to look at the structure as well as an engagement to see what type of potential uses that can be supported for the community for that site. But there is a historic facade, and that has always been something that we need to keep in mind, that this is a building of importance. It's a memorial center. So how does that get incorporated into any type of redesign, refurbishment, renovation of the site?
Right, good to hear. Also, don't forget that it is the only remaining rink anywhere in the city core. So if it is ever out of service for redevelopment, that would leave a good portion of population without a rink. And I know that is the portion of rink users that may have the lowest car use because they live in the core, right? So that's
sure.
the reality at Memorial Center right now. So I just wanted to mention that it's not it's unique in more than one way, I guess, and to keep that in mind when you're planning an upgrade. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Deputy Mayor Osterhoff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, and thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. That's a great presentation. A lot of great work happening. Just I got confused with both the cricket field and then the Little League. There's two different sports, right? We have a baseball and cricket.
Yes.
So we seem to be combining them in the same sentence. So they're totally different.
Yeah,
right?
You're correct. It is confusing. The baseball diamonds in City Park are named Cricket Field. There's no cricket being played there.
Oh my
it's that simple, Councillor.
Wow.
Sorry, it just happens to be the name. I'm sure cricket must have been played at one point. I know baseball was played in the 1870s, but it's called Cricket Field. It's the field right in front of the courthouse, and it has 2 baseball diamonds on it.
Okay, and so the budget, it is a budget related question, Mayor Patterson, I know what you're thinking. So budgeting for that, like a Little League thing is great. Is it gonna be similar to what we did with, I'm not sure it was economic development or tourism Kingston, where, with the curling Bonspiel, it will be budgeted and self-supporting. That's a profitable event, is it not?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, good question, Councillor. It is it's obviously not at, not obviously, but it is not at the scale of the Briar or the Scotties of an event, but it is a national event for, I think it's 12 and under baseball teams representing all the provinces, and they come here. It's on television. I believe TSN recently has been the one, and then the winner goes to the Little League World Series in the US that's held every year. So it will be supported by Tourism Kingston and sponsors. Part of that was the Tourism Kingston application, sponsored with CAP and partners, and it's but that's a 1 or 2 week event in 2024.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next is Councillor Osana.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a question, or first of all, thanks very much, Commissioner Higginbotham, for putting in the capital budget, plans to start looking at Memorial Center, because as Councillor Neal can probably, verify, the Williamsville Residents Association have been wondering and wanting to do some planning about Memorial Center. So that will make them so happy. My one question is about the outdoor fitness equipment that are going to be going up in some of the parks. And thank you for that. I know I've had the request for Bridle Path Park and also Woodbine Park over the last few years. And so residents will be happy. For the actual selection of the parks, is that coming to Arts Recreation Policy Committee, or will we just be getting an information report on that at some point in 2022? How will that work?
Sorry, hit it too many times. Thank you, Councillor Osanek. I'm actually going to ask Director Turner, Lucretia Turner for Rec and Leisure to step in. There she is. Thank you.
Mr.
Through you, Your Worship, and thanks, Councillor Osanek. That's a great question. So we will come to the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee with a report for you. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan does give a couple of sites. Bridle Path was one of them. We are starting out with one site. We've budgeted in Rec and Leisure for 2022, but our colleagues in engineering services as well also have some budget money for future years for different sites. So we'll come to committee, list out some of the sites that we believe we would like to obviously even them out as we phase them in. So possibly a site in the west, site in the east, site in the city central, and kind of continue with that pattern going forward, but we'll definitely come to committee with those suggestions for sure.
All right, thank you. Very exciting. Thanks.
Next is Councillor Kylie.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you. Thank you, Commissioner Hugenboss. I wanted to ask about the CIP program under climate leadership. I was wondering if you could remind me, did we get some funding for that through the FCM? I ask only because I saw that one of the expenditures in the budget, or sorry, revenue streams is provincial subsidies, but I didn't see any mention of federal money.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Kylie. So you're asking about which program specifically are you asking?
The community improvement plan. I thought though council agreed with the 0.16 increase. I also thought some of it was coming from the FCM. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, there is no funding available at this time for that program, and hence the budget need. We won't stop looking for opportunities for that. The FCM money that is not official yet, but again, I hope to have a EITP report in front of you within a couple of weeks, is for the Better Homes Kingston, which is the home energy retrofit program, and that's in the $15 million application. So there is no funding available yet. I say yet because I'm very optimistic, maybe possibly too optimistic, but for the green standard, which is supporting the net zero and near net zero new build construction program.
Right, thank you. I was conflating them in my head. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, next is Councillor Hutchison. You look like you were about to raise your hand. Do you have a question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I actually had raised my hand and I thought you saw me, so I was wrong. Bell Park and the golf practice range. I didn't really expect to see it operating in the last couple of years for obvious reasons. So the idea is to decommission that. And so are there any plans to what to do with that open space, which has got a bit of a grade to it, to put it mildly? It leads to the mountain, so-called.
Perhaps Director Turner can answer that, or I don't have the specifics of what it is planned for in the implementation of the Bell Park Master Plan. But the Christian may have more details.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll start, and I think Director Falwell was here as well as he worked on the Bell Park Master Plan. But I believe in the plan, Councillor Hutchison, it spoke to some sort of building in that current location, whether it was the same building or it was something smaller, more of a, if I remember correctly, more of a gathering space for people that were either going to be down at Bell Park playing pickleball or tennis or walking the trails or whatever the activity might be. So that was my understanding of it. I'm not sure if Director Falwell has any more information from there.
Mr. Falwell.
Thank you, and through your worship. So the driving range itself would be part of the review in phase 1 of the Bell Park Master Plan, and that's planned for 2022, 2023. Excuse me, construction 24, 25. So we have some time to get into the future use of that space.
Okay. I think there's a misapprehension. The open space area and maybe a Indigenous Cultural Center are both to the south of the driving range. So, and I'm not surprised because as far as I know, the driving range was in the master plan. However, if staff are going to decommission it, maybe I was just asking, well, maybe I haven't heard about this. I don't know that the public knows about this. I know that people have used it. I've used it myself. But how many have used it? And I guess you have to go back 3 years, right? So perhaps we could just look at that, what the usage is and what exactly is where on the master plan. Because that's my impression. I'm not upset about it. I just, there may be good reasons to decommission, but I think with the pickleball courts and so on, it's in the plan. Okay, so.
Mr. Falwell.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it's not recommending any relocation of the phase 1 assets, which are the pickleball courts, because of the configuration of the land where the driving range is. The improvements were limited because it is on the hill. There were walking paths. The real changes to the driving range were proposed in phase 3, which is long-term beyond, well, within the 15 years. Potential for, there was talk of pitch and putt, reconfiguration of the driving range. So all of that will come out through the phase 1 conversation in terms of the design of the master plan, which will happen through 2022 and 2023.
Okay, so I'll wait and see if I hear from the public. And thank you for that, though. That's probably the best you can do at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, Commissioner Hugenboss, thank you very much. And so with that, we will move to our final presentation of the evening. We'll have CEO Hurdle back to present to council on the housing and social services and also the Chief Administrative Office. CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm pleased to be here tonight to provide you with the last presentation of this budget process for 2022. So before I get started, I just want to acknowledge the work of 2 individuals that are also joining me tonight. Ruth Nordegraffer, Director of Housing and Social Services, as well as Craig Desjardins, who's our Acting Commissioner of Corporate Services. They've done tremendous work on this budget. As well, of course, as our financial services team. They've been incredible. Next slide, please. So the CAO office actually includes a number of services. Housing and social services is still within the CAO's office at this point. We do anticipate that service will migrate to community services in sometime in 2022. The airport, of course, is part of the CAO's office. And within the budget line for the CAO's office, we also have the Strategy, Innovation, and Partnerships office. So you will note that the overall increase that is being recommended is about 4%. The significant impacts are within housing and social services. This is no surprise, of course. Our CFO, Kennedy, talked about the step down funding from the federal government that continues to impact housing, and also our increase in investment for rent supplement. And just to note that in the public engagement that we did for the budget, housing was one of the areas where the public wanted to see more investment. So I just wanted to note that. Next slide, please. So in terms of housing, specifically in homelessness division, council is very aware that there's been a tremendous amount of work in this group over the last year and will continue over the next year. We have 239 units that have been approved by council that are either transitional, supportive, or affordable housing. And part of our work in 2022 will be to actually implement these units. There's, of course, some that are easier to implement because they are within existing buildings that are going to need some renovations, and other are brand new constructions, which will take a little bit more time. The total investment for these units has been around $36.3 million. That was presented to council, I believe, at the last council meeting, and that includes municipal, provincial, and federal funding. So that is actually far exceeds anything that I've seen in my time with the City of Kingston in terms of affordable housing commitment. We are going to continue, obviously, our work to implement the homelessness system recommendations. So this was approved recently by the committee, by the Housing and Homelessness Committee, as well as council. And we have issued RFPs to the community to actually be able to make some changes within our homelessness system. We know that there have been a lot of concern expressed by the community in terms of how some of the services are provided. So we are working on that. As I indicated, rent supplements and rent assistance will continue to be a big part of this. We do want to try to transition people into housing first as much as possible. The other services like integrated care hub, encampment guidelines will be reviewed in 2022. I will tell you that from a staff perspective, it's been very challenging to try to address these needs. A lot of these needs are connected to addictions and mental health, especially the population that we're seeing within the integrated care hub. And as council's aware, this is very much a healthcare type of service that municipalities are not well equipped to manage or to finance. And we're not the only community. So if you've talked to some of your colleagues in other municipalities, I can tell you what we hear, even from smaller municipalities like Cornwall, Belleville, is that they're struggling with encampments. And this is something that they've never necessarily experienced before, but since the pandemic, we've really seen an increase in terms of the homelessness in different communities. Of course, we'll continue with the implementation of the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, as well as the work on the Mayor's Task Force on housing. And although it feels like we recently completed the update for the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, we will start to prepare for the next update. Next slide, please. So the social services and early years division, there will be a lot of change that will take place over the next couple of years. And most of that are changes that are provincially driven. So council, you'll probably recall that I think we had a couple of reports that talked about moving the employment services out of the regular social services provision, and that's something that the province has been working on. The City of Kingston is targeted to make that transition in 2023. So ahead of that, we have been working on how do we plan these changes before they take effect, and how do we prepare basically our workforce. So we have applied for the Audit and Accountability Fund provided by the province, and you'll recall that council, you approved this particular project to look at how we can really transform human services. So look at integration between housing, social services, and early years to make it easier for the clients that we're working with when they're coming in and need services, so they don't have to go through multiple layers of services if they do require Ontario work support as well as housing. There should be a one-stop approach, and that's what we've been working on. And that will actually enable us to achieve some savings as well. So the anticipated reduction in the budget is about 1.2 million starting in 2023, and that's related to the employment services being removed. So that's provincial funding that we will be losing at that point in time. So the plan with one focus is addressing that change in level of funding, and we will be bringing that report to council with more details in December. I do want to let you know that we have been meeting with our QP representatives to talk about this project, and we have also been meeting with staff to try to address as many questions as they may have at this point, recognizing that it's still at early stage in terms of this rollout. We will continue the work that's been started, obviously, since the pandemic with the Social Services Recovery Task Force. There's been a lot of great initiatives coming out of that. Food security, for example, you'll recall, Council, that you endorsed funding to support a partnership project with United Way and a warehouse to provide better distribution of food to people that are most in need. So these are initiatives that are started with these groups, and we will continue this work. The early years in childcare services. So we had to pause the plan in 2020, of course, with the pandemic, and we will be reinitiating that. I can tell you one of the challenge that this service has seen is a lack of workforce, and they have been actively trying to recruit workers to make sure that they can continue to provide service. I know this is not news to council. We are seeing obviously workforce challenges across the board in different sectors. CFO Kennedy noted actually in her presentation that there's been some change in funding there. We did have 2 childcare centers that closed during the pandemic, so those have been removed from the budget, which does explain why there has been some change around the childcare funding. And of course, we will continue the work on the community safety and wellbeing plan that was approved by council in 2021. And we will continue our work with our partners to implement this. Next slide. So this gives you an overview of the capital budget for housing and social services. There is a lot of money in the works in progress, and all of those funds have been committed to various housing development. Some of them were prior to this council's term, so I do want to make that clear. We do have some funds that are left for projects that are being completed now that were prior to council's term. I do want to comment on 1316 Princess Street because Councillor Hutchison asked some questions last night in terms of the status. So this project has now its zoning approval. They have submitted their actual application for building permits. I think that was done last week. And they have issued or started the tendering process. So that's been initiated. There are a couple of things that are happening. There is some water main work that's taking place on the site, and that's related to Kingston Co-op. That needs to take place before the actual construction of the buildings can start. And we also have not received the final documentation from CMHC for the funding, and Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation will need that final documentation before they can award the work to any company for the construction. So based on information that we have and timelines, Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation estimates that they will be able to start the work in March of 2022 for this construction. I will note that Lower Union is also on there, which is one that we've talked a lot about at council. This one, renovations are ongoing. We are targeting early 2022 to be able to move some individuals into some transitional housing. And of course, we're working with Tippy Moza on that. For 2022, the ask is divided in 2 sections. There is the $1.1 million upgrade to the west wing of 805 Ridley, which we did discuss at our previous council meeting, and it was in a report specifically for housing. And of course, we do have some provincial funding that we are anticipating will be allocated in 2022. This particular provincial funding has not yet been allocated, so we will need to come to council with some recommendations. Next slide, please. So the airport, you will notice that there is a reduction of about $91,000 in terms of property tax support for the airport in 2022. And that's primarily due to an increase in revenue that we are anticipating in 2022. As council is very aware, I think every single airport has been struggling with recovery post-pandemic. So Kingston is no different from other places. And we've been working really hard to try to reactivate service at the airport. So a few things that I do want to note. The airport, in order to be able to operate the airport with any level of service, we do have to meet the Canadian Aviation Regulation and Transport Canada. So even if we were to have only medical flights, we do have to meet those standards. And that means automatically we do incur a certain level of cost for our operations. And there's just no way to remove that unless we completely close the airport and we wouldn't have access to medical flights. So that's obviously not something from a staff perspective we've ever recommended. The good news is that, as council's aware, we've received a significant grant from the federal government for 2022 to restart our air service. And that is obviously contributing significantly to the increase in our revenues of $867,000. There is also a portion of that that is anticipated to be increased service. So we are in the process of finalizing negotiations with a new airline, with new airline partners. Actually, we're working on 2 of them. I do anticipate that we will have some announcements within the next 2 weeks to actually reopen or restart some service at the airport. So I think that's very positive news, and we're looking forward to more activity on the airport in 2022. We will continue to work with our partner. I do want to point out that Tourism Kingston and Kingston Economic Development has been great to work with and very supportive on this. There is a capital ask for the airport for this year. It's fairly minimal, and it's primarily related to asset management work that we do need to do at the airport. Next slide, please. So the CAO's office, there are a few things that are happening in 2022. And you will notice that the increase is about 13% in that office. And that's primarily to support the ongoing implementation of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So council, you will recall that when I brought forward a report in 2021 to finance this particular portfolio, we were recommending working reserve fund for this year, but we knew that in 2022 there would be a budget impact. So this is the budget impact in terms of the implementation of the portfolio. So we will continue to work with public health to manage the pandemic. There is no question that although vaccination has been, I think, very successful, we're not fully out of the pandemic yet, and there's still a lot of work to be done with public health. I can tell you that I've worked more with public health in the last year and a half than I've probably done all my years with the City of Kingston, and it's been a great relationship, so we need to continue to do that. Part of my role as well as the CAO will be to try to continue to lead the organization to move from a pandemic response, which is where we've been in the last year and a half, to more of a strategic long-term type of work. You know, in the last, definitely in the last year, a lot of our efforts were put into pandemic response, and it's been definitely a challenge to try to manage out of that and get back to more of some of the normal and strategic planning. So as it is difficult for everybody, it's also very challenging for our employees to try to manage this change and pivot again to move to a more regular, what I would call a more regular municipal operations. Definitely ongoing support to Tourism Kingston. I think Megan Knott talked about a few of those things the other night in terms of the Kingston Penitentiary. This will be coming back to City Council in 2022. We did put that on hold during the pandemic. A conference center that was also mentioned by Tourism Kingston. and ongoing support for filming, and primarily at Kingston Pen. That's where we've seen a tremendous amount of activity for filming and interest. The other one that I do want to mention, and this again went through a report to council earlier this year, is the community plan to create a more welcoming and inclusive downtown. So we've had a number of meetings now with different community partners, and also including people with lived experience, to try to look at what can we do to really improve our downtown, make it more welcoming and safer as well for everyone. So it's really interesting to see the different perspectives. And I think it was at the DBIA presentation, there were some comments about that, and also Tourism Kingston. So this is really work that includes and involves the community, and we will be bringing back a report with some recommendations in 2022. Next slide, please. So the Strategy, Innovation and Partnerships Office, as I indicated earlier, that is part of the CAO budget. And this group has done a tremendous amount of work. It's been actually quite remarkable, the amount of money that they have been able to secure for the corporation through the grant, through grant applications. So on the slide, you can see that in 2021, so far, we've been able to secure $18.4 million. So a lot of this funding actually has been able to support some of the capital projects that you've heard about through various presentations tonight and yesterday as well. So this has been extremely critical because it's enabled us to reduce the amount of municipal tax-based contribution that we've had to make to these projects. And of course, there is still a lot of work that's going on. And as you can see, we already are working on $11.4 million for 2022, and we are not even yet in 2022. So a very busy group there. The office has also, as you're aware, been working quite closely with the Economic Development Corporation on the implementation of the Integrated Economic Development Strategy, as well as the Rural Economic Development Strategy. So I do want to point out for council, there will be an announcement shortly or in the near future about our new manager that will be taking on this portfolio for the rural economic development. And we are going to make sure that we can get started on some of the recommendations in that report fairly quickly. There has been, of course, with Economic Development Corporation, a partnership to continue to support the business office for the city to try to streamline business interaction with city departments. So there's been a tremendous amount of work there too. And we really started this in 2021 because during the pandemic, we had to redeploy staff and we weren't able to get this going. Workforce development, well, I think you're all aware that workforce is one of the biggest challenges right now for most employers and finding the right workforce. So that is going to be critical work over the next year. This group will also be overseeing the partnership, which will lead to the Family Physician Incentive and Recruitment Program that council approved at the last council meeting. Next slide, please. There will be ongoing work with the implementation of the Kingston Health Innovation Hub. And again, this is a partnership and grant funding that we received through FedDev. And we will continue to do a lot of work with the CURT, which has continued to do a tremendous amount of work in working groups and continue to report regularly to council on the progress of the Kingston Economic Recovery Team. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, that this is my last slide. So any questions from council?
Okay, thank you very much. First up is Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Thank you very much, CEO Hurdle. Okay, one question on the rent supplements, and I don't have my notes from last night when Ms. Kennedy was speaking to the amount. I know you referenced it, but really mostly what I'm interested in is the percentage change. If you have any, just even just any sense of that, that would be helpful. And I guess secondly, really, I'm interested to know that funding, the rent supplement, does it go specifically into the Housing First portfolio? Or how will it be administered?
So I see Ms. Nordegraff is her hand raised.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. So we have a couple of different rent supplements funding lines in our budgets. I will kind of remind council that there are rent supplements that are specifically going towards the social housing portfolio. So those are the rent supplements that are, accessible for those individuals that are on the social housing wait list. So those rent supplements are going down because they are the contributions from the other levels of government have continued to go down as part of the step down. But to your question, the rent assistance or the additional kind of funding that we are asking for is in line with the recommendations from the homelessness system review and will be specifically going towards the Housing First kind of model. So those would be, the rent assistance that we would provide to those individuals that are currently accessing our homelessness system. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Next is Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Thank you, CAO Hurdle. I just wanted to circle back to the airport for a moment, if we could. I've lost track, if I'm honest, because I've been on the advisory board for about a year now. I'm wondering the $1.7 million that you referenced in the presentation around the restart, is that money that is publicly allocated at this point, or does that involve the forthcoming announcement that you had talked about? In other words, do we know what it's being spent on?
Mr. Desjardins.
Your worship, through you to Councillor Kiley, the grant funds that we have received are specific to some cost categories, including covering some wages, covers a fairly significant amount for marketing, and we'll be working with Tourism Kingston on that. It also covers some work around master planning that was in our budget that we no longer have to spend. So it is fairly specific.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Ostroff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Thank you, CEO Hurdle. Excellent presentation. Quick question just regarding the work under your portfolio there. So the tourism part related to the penitentiary and all that, is that something that you will eventually hand off to tourism? Is that something that will gain its own support? And is that what the goal is, to put yourself out of work on that file?
CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for this question. So right now, the structure that we're looking at is for the city to have some kind of lease agreement with the federal government. So you'll recall that prior to the pandemic, we did actually, the city was the party that had the agreement with the federal government, and we were able to access it. And then we had partners like St. Lawrence Parks Commission that were operating tours, and Tourism Kingston that was handling the filming piece. So at this point, I think that's what the federal government is interested in looking at for next year, as we are starting to hopefully get back to more of a normal. Now, what I can tell you, what we are currently discussing is the amount for that lease, because you will recall that the report that I had brought to council that was put on hold talked about a $1.1 million. And I have been, I think, quite clear in my conversations that the city at this point doesn't feel that this is reasonable, considering that we are still getting out of the pandemic and our revenue projections are a lot less than they were prior to COVID. So that's something that I will be bringing back to council. But yes, our partners are going to be the primary agent for service delivery.
Yeah, I can certainly see the importance of your office role there too. So thank you for that. Similar to downtown, the DBIA, I'm wondering, is that something you're partnering with them? Or did you already say that related to the perception of downtown and all that? I'm sure that's something eventually they can run with as well, perhaps.
So thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. So they are definitely, the DBIA is at the table amongst many other partners, but we do obviously need our social services agencies heavily involved, and I would say even our healthcare agencies heavily involved, because what we are seeing are people that have much more complex needs than maybe what we saw 2 or 3 years ago in our downtown. The plan will also look at some improvements, Deputy Mayor Oosterhoff, improvements in terms of, you know, some of the infrastructure or event-related improvements that we can look at making to make the space more inclusive and attractive to our population, our residents, and our tourists.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that might connect to my next question. It might be for Ms. Nordegraaf as well. So in the homelessness, and I want to commend your staff and everyone with the city doing tremendous work in that area. And I know that in the homelessness, is it helpful to categorize it and to then, and then to work with government agencies and where you have mental health issues, addictions and drugs, and just homelessness related to life circumstances? Is it helpful in your search for funding and in problem solving in that area to divide and conquer kind of? Is that what you do, or is that something that we could do better that way?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson, thanks for that question. So it certainly has been a much more, we've certainly seen much more efforts to look at kind of better integration and partnerships between the different sectors. I think the pandemic has certainly increased that opportunity for partnership. CEO Hurdle just alluded to the need to have everybody at the table. So obviously through our funding, we are, and the funding that we receive as a municipality and that we utilize for the homelessness, our focus really is on kind of the shelter and housing solutions. But we also certainly recognize that we cannot do that alone, and we really need our health partners around the table and other social services. So I think in our funding, we certainly have been having some really great conversations with multiple levels of government and multiple departments, but ultimately also really to kind of come together to make that case for that integrated approach. That might be a bit of a broad answer, but it certainly is something that we approach if we look at funding opportunities. Quite often it really helps to kind of make that integrated case rather than kind of looking at our own individual silos. But there is definitely an opportunity to look at stacking different funding pots to actually come to a program that we then can sustain and really look at the broader kind of needs of clients or community.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Patterson.
Okay, next is Councillor Hutchison.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'll say thank you to the CEO for the information on 1316 Princess Street. It's most welcome. I just want to ascertain a couple of things. Where you said this, but I didn't quite catch it. Where are we at with the planning application?
So thank you, and through Mr. Mayor, the zoning application is complete. The site plan, I believe, is just being signed off right now, and the application for the building permit, I believe, was submitted last week, Councillor Hutchison. So everything is moving along very well. And like I said, the tendering process has been initiated by Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation. I think the missing piece at this point for us and for Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation is the formal documentation of confirmation of funding from CMHC, which is critical for Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation to be able to award the tender once they complete their process. So we have been in touch with the federal government to inquire as to when we anticipate that documentation will be provided.
So can we take it that the funding is in process, that we have been received an affirmative response from the federal government?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the funding has been committed, but rightly so, Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation wants to make sure that they have everything in writing and all the documentation that's required as it relates to this funding before they actually proceed with an award of tender.
Right. And and you think it's possible, I think, I don't think you quite committed to this, that the start date could be like March of 2022 next year, correct?
So thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's currently that's the timeline that that is anticipated for a start of construction.
Right. And the Rapid Housing Initiative gets announced tomorrow, I guess. I mean, formal tomorrow. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is my understanding. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All good news. On a question that sort of follows up on something Councillor Holmes said, the increased investment in rent supplements for Housing First, what is the source of the rent supplements? Is that just simply municipal, or how is that working?
Through you, Mayor Patterson. Thank you for that question, Councillor Hutchison. Yes, that is correct. So the rent assistance, again, separate from the rent supplements that are attached to our social housing portfolio, the rent assistance is the ask is to have that allocation come from our municipal funding.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm glad to see we're going to be looking at more options, however challenging that might be. Thank you.
Next is Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Two very quick questions. I see there you've mentioned at various times pending or anticipated grants or monies from upper tier. Those haven't been calculated into those bottom line figures you presented, have they? They're so that your requests may indeed be lowered.
So thank you, and through Mr. Mayor, I'll get started, and Acting Commissioner Desjardins may want to jump in. So Councillor Neal, if you're referring to any housing related provincial or federal grant funding, those are not pending, those are confirmed, and they are in the numbers of 36.3 million, give or take, of investment into affordable housing. In the Office of Strategy, Innovation, Partnership, so that one was showing different basically amounts. Some of them were confirmed, some were pending because we have submitted grant applications we have not yet heard back, and some of them are applications that we are preparing to submit. So this gave you basically an overview of those three different categories, and that funding is for various programs or projects within the city. It's not necessarily housing related.
And given the very recent throne speech and some promises that were made during the election, do you anticipate grants or applications made by the city may well bear fruit on both housing and social services?
So I'll thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, Councillor Neal. I do believe that there will be a next round of RHI, so rapid housing, and Director Nordegraff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that that's something that we are anticipating will be coming up. And other than that, I'm not sure what might come out of the federal government budget, but that's something we'll need to monitor and see from a housing perspective.
So would that lower your budgeted request, or would it indeed be money for new investment in homelessness, for instance?
So thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So depending on the criteria, Councillor Neal, that they attach to the funding, it is quite likely that we would not be able to, I'm assuming, attach it to an existing project because there's a tendency, obviously, to not want to fund projects that are already underway. But, you know, I would have to see the criteria, but chances are, my guess would be for additional or new projects that the federal government would be looking at. And I'm not sure if Director Nordegraff would have more information on the details here.
Yeah, just to kind of quickly add that we're just really trying to be proactive in having projects lined up should we be in a position to receive more federal funding. Because we, for instance, have learned with the rapid housing program that there are very fast and rapid and quick timelines on those. So that is something, and it's kind of part of the work plan for 2022 to really work towards having more potential projects in the pipeline should we get the funding, or should there be funding available.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, through your worship. I have a couple questions with regards to some of the social service type budgetary items. Ones that really strike a chord with me, and I think they're important, are the Spade and Neuter program. I couldn't find it in the budget. I'm just wondering if we're going to be doing that again, offering services for low-income families with pets that need to be spayed or neutered. And second to that, the dental program for those that are not on social assistance but are low income earning Kingston residents. There was an allotment of funds. It used to be a rather large earmarked budget, and I can't remember the name of that reserve. And I'm wondering if that reserve is still in existence or if it's been depleted for those people who require dental work that do not have coverage or do not have coverage under ODSP or Ontario Works. I thought those are two very critical programs, and I'm wondering if you can give me an update or a status, because I couldn't really discern in the budget because it's not granular enough for me.
Through you, Mayor Patterson. Thank you, Councillor Chappelle, for that question. Those are two really great questions. So regarding the PETS program, yes, that's continuing to be part of our municipal fee assistance program. I will apologize, I don't have the number in front of me either, but that is an ongoing program that we continue to run, and it's very successfully so. Regarding your question around the health benefits, that too continues to be in our budgets, and again, continues to be a very important, crucial program, especially to help some people from the cliff effect if they would move from Ontario Works into like low income low or employment that may not provide benefits. And the social, the funds that you're referring to is still in place and is being utilized to fund part of that health benefit program. It actually is in your binder on 119, it's the $110,000 under transfers from reserves. So it's still there. And I think CAO Hurdle has something to add to that as well.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Chappelle, to answer your question about which reserve fund, it's the Social Housing, Social Services Stabilization Fund that was created a number of years ago when the city was actually managing directly the payments for Ontario Works. So that reserve fund generates interest every year. And so far, the allocation that we're seeing for the dental program or the medical dental program is essentially equivalent to the interest that's being generated on a yearly basis. So give or take, it's in that range. So it's actually has not been depleting the reserve fund itself. The reserve fund has been left fairly intact. And we anticipate that through the work that we're going to have to do with the shifting the employment services away from our social services over the next year with the provincial changes, we're anticipating that we will most likely need to utilize some of the funds that are currently in the social services stabilization fund. But we will be bringing a report back to council on that in December.
Okay, thank you, CAO Hurdle. I'm just very cognizant that this sort of self-funding model seems to be working, and it would be great if it could be left intact. So if there's other options or other funding models that we can support you in applying for, I think that would be personally my preferred preference to ensure that we support the low-income residents of Kingston going forward. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, CEO Hurdle, thank you very much. So with that, we will move to deliberations on our operating and capital budget for 2022. What I will ask for is a mover and a seconder to put the budget on the floor, please, for discussion. Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Doherty. So the budget has been moved and seconded. It is on the floor, and at this point, we'll open up the floor for any discussion. And if there is no discussion, then we can call the vote. Okay, Deputy Mayor Oosterhoff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. And just a general question, perhaps for our CFO, Ms. Kennedy, or our CAO, regarding the, I'm going to find my notes, forgive me, Mayor, regarding the assessment, and I sent a question about that just today, and the increase that we will have this year. And I guess I wanted to ask about how we come to manage the extra funds that we are bringing in. And the concern I have is thinking about there's so many Kingstonians have contacted me and us over the year concerned about our taxes and the increases that we constantly have. And here we have an opportunity to take funds, and maybe I can learn about a little bit more about how that grows. It's our tax base that grows, something we should celebrate like we have and acknowledge that that's a good thing for our city. But so someone has asked me, how come we have to spend that right away? Why couldn't we, if it was our family budget, which we all have, when you come into money, you choose to do your important tasks, but you also choose to save some for a rainy day kind of thing. And instead of just growing our expenditures. And I'm wondering how we rationalize that and how we, how we manage that as a financial strategy and showing stewardship to our city and to our community, that we are not just looking for ways to spend it, but to choose wisely or choose not to spend, perhaps pay down our debts some more, and just to keep us growing stronger financially as a community. And that's an overall question, Mayor Patterson.
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for that question, Councillor Oosterhoff. That's a great financial planning question. So I think in terms of strategy, what we do, and I think you're talking about the assessment growth, which was very healthy for projected for 2022. So we do a couple of things. One thing that we will look at when we're having the assessment growth is ensuring that we are utilizing that for growth-related demands. So increases in services, new types of services, new facilities coming on board, those kinds of things, so that we continue to focus on spending restraints and reviewing our spending on our existing service levels. So we're not really borrowing from that new revenue to pay for things that already exist today, unless we've got something that's come up out of the ordinary. So that's the first thing. And in a year like this, and one of the reasons we do the 4-year projections, and we do project, 2 to 3 years out with growth based on the building permits that have been issued, we keep an eye on that as well. So one of the reasons we do that, so that we can see what's coming and we can think a little longer term, which is I think what you're saying is, rather than spending it all today, do we need to put some away for tomorrow, knowing that we're not going to have 2.3% growth on a continual basis. And that is something that we would look at each year. Frankly, for 2022, we didn't really have the ability to do that because that growth really helped us with some of our pandemic related gaps. So I talked the other night about our revenues not coming back online as quickly as our related expenditures are. And so there's a gap there. And so the growth really helped that for 2022, as well as some of our new growth related services and investment in things like our equity and diversity, some of our new facilities and those kinds of things. So there really wasn't the room for that. The plus side is that growth continues. Once it's on the roll, it's on there for good. So we have those dollars next year and the year after, so we can continue to look at that. But I think your point is well taken, and some of the discussion that we have had when we do have maybe a different year than we've had with the pandemic and some of the response to the pandemic for 2022 is to look at things like, should we be maybe putting our working fund reserve up a little bit? It's taken a bit of a hit through the pandemic. So that might be an example. So absolutely, those are things that we look at. We look at that 4-year and probably even 6 to 7 year viewpoint when we're looking in that to say, okay, what are the future years going to look like? And perhaps maybe there's something that we can do in terms of longer term with those funds. So hopefully that answers the question, but thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Osanik.
Can I just buy myself some more time? I'm sorry, just working on an amendment, Your Worship, and go to someone else.
Sure. So we're in committee of the whole, so we can do multiple rounds. So I'll put you at the top of the list for the second round. Is Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. So I have a couple of questions. One actually did deal with the working fund reserve. This year we took out $1 million to support our small businesses and the arts community. And I'm wondering where I don't see where we've returned that $1 million back to replace and replenish that working fund reserve. And if it's not been done, can it be done with the existing budget infrastructure? And second of all, the question also related to taxes. So I'm just giving you two, so Ms. Kennedy, you'd be able to respond to both. The second one related to that is also coupling on to what Councillor Saha has mentioned. And that is, over the last number of budget years, I've been advocating that the increase in our assessment growth, we should take 50% of that growth and target it to debt reduction or building reserves. Yet it always continues to push down the road. And I understand this year we're in a pandemic, but what would it take? What would be the impact? How much money would it have been if we had taken 50% of this increased growth this year of 3.7%? How much actual money would that have been that we could have targeted towards debt reduction?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So thanks, Councillor Chappelle. So on your first question with respect to the working fund reserve, we have not replenished that 1 million now. I believe we had in the report that the balance, the working fund reserve is somewhere around $7.5 million projected, I think by the end of 2022. So at this point, we have not replenished that. Having said that, it is something we are keeping an eye on, and I am hoping that potentially there may be some surplus funds at the end of the year that we can start to replenish that. So We in the past have liked to keep up around 9 to 10 million in that fund. I sleep better if there's 10 million sitting there. So we are definitely down. We've been down for probably 2 or 3 years, and certainly the pandemic hasn't helped. So it is definitely a longer term strategy that we'll continue to keep an eye on and potentially put some monies back in there when we can. In terms of the assessment growth, so we had about, I think it was $5.5 million of growth. I believe it was about 1.7 million over what we had projected for growth. So we did know last year when we were doing the projections for this year that we would have that increased amount of growth to deal with. So, but certainly we had about an extra 1.7 million. So probably about 850,000 of that we could put towards debt. It wouldn't be paying off existing debt because we are locked into that. Our debt now is all with Infrastructure Ontario. And so there is no buyout option for those debts. So we essentially would be paying out most of the interest anyway that we would have to pay. So there wouldn't be any advantage to doing that. Where it could be done then is, as I presented a couple of nights ago, we have about $136 million of debt that council's approved, but we have not yet issued. And so if we were looking at doing something, that's where we would be focusing in on, is not issuing that debt, paying back any advances from IO, any construction advances, and then paying it basically as pay as you go. So that certainly would be the attack that we would take with respect to that. Having said that, certainly for 2022, as council's aware now that you've had 3 long nights of going through the numbers, definitely with trying to recover from the pandemic, there really wasn't a lot of extra room to do that. But again, that is certainly a long-term strategy that we keep our eyes on.
Okay. Supplemental question I have, I'm not sure which department would go to, but yesterday, so the presentation that we had from the Cataract Conservation Authority indicated that they are reluctant to ask for additional funds because of the way their funds are generated across multiple municipalities that they serve. Yet the bulk of the work is generated by the city of Kingston. I understand the city pays a larger portion, of course, but we still are imposing some extra work on them, such as the requirement for a hydrogeologist. And so, Your Worship, I'm asking maybe this question to you, but how would I frame or support adding an additional $200,000 to the budget to give directly to the Conservation Authority so that they can acquire a hydrogeologist so that they can manage and look at these extensive projects that were being foisted upon them through the city of Kingston? What do I need to do, and what timing do I need to take place to put forward such a motion?
I'm going to need some consultation time with staff on that. CEO Hurdle, do you have something that you some direction you want to provide on that?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So one of the things that we can look at, and it's not something that would necessarily amend the budget tonight, but is to look at how do we implement a chargeback in terms of our fees and charges for the different types of application that can help to finance such a position, so that the development community is, through their various application, paying at least a portion of the position, and it's not entirely paid through the tax base. I think that's something that we can look at and bring back to council in terms of a business model and how it could work. We might even want to look at other expertise that we do need to contract out a lot through our planning reviews, through peer reviews. So we might want to look at those and bring back something to council that would provide a bit of a business plan, which would show how the development community can also contribute to these costs, because these are costs obviously that we are incurring as it relates to the development application. So that would take away the burden entirely on the tax base.
Okay, that's an interesting approach.
Okay, so Councillor Spade, just hold on. There's a point of order from Councillor Carly. Councillor Carly.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Yes, point of order, just wanting clarity that are we even able to micromanage agencies' budgets at this point? I'm not against the idea that Councillor Chappelle's saying, but could we dive into the library board and everyone else, or is that just not what we're doing here?
Right. So it's a good question. So I think my interpretation of what Councillor Chappelle was proposing is not that this would be an amendment to the CRCA budget, but was an amendment to the city budget to provide extra dollars for this project. So I think it is in order in this case by Councillor Chappelle. I think based on the comments from staff, rather than trying to amend the budget tonight, I would suggest working with staff and bringing forward a motion you bring to a council meeting to direct some of that analysis and work to be able to put something like that together.
I'll look forward to working with the CAO Hurdle on this because I do think it's something that's critically important for the protection of groundwater in our community. And certainly it's something that the populace has been asking for, and I think we should take action on it. So if that's going to expedite this process, I will certainly take your guidance on that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Neal.
Just very quickly, like Councillor Kiley, I'm not totally opposed to this idea, but I think this came up when the director of the Conservation Authority was speaking to us. And I'm not sure that the message I was interpreting anyway was that she was really keen to have and I mean, we don't.
So Councillor Neal, I think I'm going to jump in here. So because I've suggested to Councillor Chappelle that this would have to be dealt with in a separate motion, I'm going to rule out of order any discussion on that here tonight with this budget. So when and if Councillor Chappelle brings a motion to council to discuss this, that will be the time where we can absolutely delve into discussion and debate on it.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions about the brownfields program going forward, which I brought up the other day on night, but I let drop so that other people could ask their questions. The problem with the amount of brownfields rebates increases significantly over the next 3 or 4 years. And the problem is when the rebates exceed the 1% annual capital levy. And that does appear it may be happening. It's so my first question is how much does the brownfield allocation grow per year after 2024, 2025? 2025, it's $3.45 million. Do we know how it increases?
So Councillor Hutchison, I'll allow the question, but I do just want to remind Council that we're approving the 2022 budget. So I hear what you're saying.
We're also approving the projections. So
no, we're not approving projections. You know, staff are giving us projections, and so I think it's fair to ask some questions on that, but we're only approving the 2022 budget. That's all that's on the floor in front of us right now. But that being said, is there someone from staff that can respond to that? Mr. Hugebos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm just sorry, we lost Paul McClatchy for a bit. I'm trying to get him back onto the call, but I'm sorry if I could ask Jeff Walker, the manager of taxation, or Ms. Kennedy, they might have those projection numbers more at hand than I would.
Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, the projections do continue to increase through the phases of the Davis Tannery development. And right now, we would be topping out around the $5 million range with those. I would remind though that each of those only moves forward as the growth comes on, as that project is assessed and becomes taxable.
Right, fair enough. The so the issue is that is there a limit to the annual brownfields allocation as it relates to the brownfields bylaw? But the bylaw says we should, well, it just indicates that going above the 1% capital levy is of concern. But obviously, because you'd be putting more money out than you're taking in. So is there a limit? Has that been ascertained?
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, each project is assessed and approved on its own accord. So there is not a limit set for the amount of brownfield development that can be approved at any point in time. It's just each project is brought to council and approved on its own.
Yeah, no, okay, I understand that. Okay, thank you. The question is really, are you in essence saying that the numbers in the taxation operating budget are placeholder numbers? They're not real numbers?
I would, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would say that the numbers that are in the budget are the best estimates as to the timing that the project will be completed, the value that it will be assessed at and become taxable at. But the monies do not become payable until the developer has completed all of the tasks required through the Brownfield Development Program, been audited for all of the costs that were approved, been assessed for the property, and that the taxes have been paid for a minimum of 1 year prior to any rebates being offered or being paid through.
Yes, I understand that. But they also, but the projections here are based on the assumption that that will take place, right? Based on what we know about the Davis Tannery and the North Block and 700 Gardner's Road and some smaller amounts.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and yes, Councillor Hutchison, that's correct. So we have projections based on the proposals and the applications that have come to council that have been approved, such as the Davis Tannery from a brownfields perspective, not the entire project, as well as other locations such as the North Block, 700 Gardners, and I mean, there may be other smaller ones, but obviously the ones that make up the bulk of the projections are ones that have come to council and have been approved. So those best estimates are put in those projections with the information that was provided to council in those applications.
Right. So, okay, so my concern is that when we're doing the rebating, services are still applied to the developments for the year after they're developed, and ensuing 9 years, a total of 10 years. Each time we do that, we rebate most of the money back for what, but the development still has to be paid for. I mean, the services are still being paid. So, or because they're being delivered to those developments and, you know, for everything that they receive, like everybody else in the city. Is that not a fair description of what's going on?
Just kidding.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, Councillor Hutchison. So the program is based on that, on the fact that we're looking at the policy that describes the benefit of seeing the sites remediated and developed is a benefit to the community. So once they're developed and taxes are fully paid, then a portion of those taxes get rebated back to pay off the those remediation costs. Of course, the project is still built and there are people living there or people working there, so they still demand services of the city, but it is part of the council endorsed policy of the Brownfields Community Improvement Plan that the rebate program is a necessary tool in order to see these sites redeveloped. That's how the program works. We do have a chart, I believe. Derek, who's operating the meeting tonight, can provide a chart showing that as there are rebate benefits issued over the life of the CIP program, there are also a cumulative amount of gross municipal taxes that do eventually come to the city after after the benefit period has passed. So you see in the infancy of the program, back in 2007, 2008, 2009, you're roughly seeing similar amount of benefits being issued on a yearly basis and gross municipal taxes getting paid to the city. And then as the program continues to grow and the projects that were funded isn't the best word, but rebated, once those start to drop off and all the taxes stay at the city, you see the cumulative effect going forward. So yes, there are some spike years with the projects that have been committed, that you signed agreements like with North Block and with the Tannery site going into 2023 and beyond. The cumulative impact of the tax growth for the city is quite substantial, as you can see from the projections. More and more projects are coming off the rebate program, such as Block D and other bigger projects that were early investments by the city.
Okay. I actually do follow that. Okay, so although I would like to get a copy of that graph, my question is really, when we are paying for services for these developments, that is money expended by the rest of the city to support the development. And when it's small enough, perhaps it doesn't matter and the whole principle applies. But my question is that when we've expended that money to support those brownfields projects throughout their 10-year process, we are expending money for the services they receive, and we never see that money come back. Because, and this is the principle, because in 2041, which was the end of that table, all along there, we have been paying for the services that are.
So you have 30 seconds on this round.
Okay. We are paying for those services. And at the time of 2041, monies received from those developments, are they not paying for the services in 2041?
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So just a couple of comments, Councillor Hutchison. So you're correct. I think for the number of years that we have to repay the brownfield for each of those projects, there is an incremental cost of services that the city is continuing to cover. And I think that's part of the cost of the brownfield program. It's part of council's decision to approve a project and say, we'll cover those costs for the 2, 3, up to 10 years of the brownfield. But it's also important to note at the end of that period, when those are paid off, we still have that new assessment growth sitting in the coffers. So from that point on, then that assessment growth is paying for those services. The other piece of it, just to keep in mind, and particularly with I think some of the more recent projects, and Commissioner Hugomas may have more detail on this, but for some of them, we're not paying back at 100% of the incremental assessment. And so we have a portion we're using to pay the brownfield over that number of years, but we also have some additional, another incremental part that could be going towards whatever that incremental cost of operations is.
So I think I'm going to move on at this point. And so we are in committee of the whole, so we can always circle back if needed. Okay, next on my list is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I just want to thank the CFO and the whole team for presenting this budget. Really what we have in front of us is a budget that's below inflation, and considering that we just came through a pandemic, that's pretty impressive. So I just want to, it's a precautionary question. I just want to make sure that are there any deferrals or any cuts to services or kind of projects that we should be aware of that we may not have heard of, or but we may hear in the upcoming council meetings?
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, no, Councillor Doherty, all of our existing services are still included in there. I believe there's a couple things the commissioners may have mentioned. The one that comes to mind, just because it's tonight, so it's familiar in my mind, there was some discussion around the Bell Park piece. But I think if there's any of those offside ones that they have been brought up from the commissioners, I can't think of anything else that's going to be a surprise later on.
It's fantastic. Makes it even more impressive. Now, when we communicate this budget, when we present it, will it also from our communication department, will it include perhaps a pie chart to show what's kind of legislative kind of spending, what's discretionary, and what might be some of the healthcare costs that we shouldn't be paying but are provincially mandated? How are we going to present this budget?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So I'm not sure if there's anybody on from communications on tonight, but I can tell you I've had some conversations with them about this, and we're working on it. So hopefully within the next 24 hours or so, we will have something put together. What we would like to do is try to do something that's very short and concise and easy to digest. But that does illustrate some of the important things that are within this budget, particularly where there's been increased investment in new services and that type of thing. So we're certainly working on it, and our communications officer has some ideas around infographics and that kind of thing that we can do. We'd like to actually post it on the budget engagement page as kind of a wrap up and close up of the budget engagement. So we'll certainly be doing that over the next couple of days and maybe the weekend.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is actually for the CFO. So I'm because we hear a lot about debt, always at budget time, we hear a lot about debt and concern about debt, and I understand that. And I think people tend to look at it almost like a household budget, but it's not really a household budget. So I'm looking at debt relative. So debt as manageable debt, and debt as a challenge to the city's ability to operate in future. And the fact that we have debt, let's use the bridge as an example, is really almost an element of fairness in my mind. And so this is what I'm looking for your opinion on, because it isn't just the taxpayers of today that are going to use that bridge, it's also the taxpayers of tomorrow. So it's fair to distribute the cost of that among not just the people who are paying taxes today, but the people that are paying taxes in future, who will use it in future. And that's exactly what carrying debt does, in my mind. Is that a fair assessment, Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, that is a fair assessment. And I think that is the foundation of where we've been trying to go over the last almost 20 years in terms of our debt management strategy. So what we have today, and I think I mentioned the other night, if you look at that 136 million, of which the bridge has 30 million in that, that's exactly accurate, Councillor Hill. The taxpayers today shouldn't be paying for that. I'm going to be driving over that bridge, say for the next 100 years. It won't be me, but my descendants will be driving over that bridge for up to 100 years. And so yes, the taxpayers of tomorrow should be paying for that. In the past, and I think I mentioned it, we still have a couple of items still in that 136 million outstanding that I would call more being asset management. Those are the ones that really don't fit within that. And that's why we're trying to get our asset management costs, our replacements of our existing assets to be pay as you go. So it is the existing taxpayers that are actually paying for that. But you're absolutely right in terms of those bigger growth type projects. We want the people that are going to be using that from a growth perspective tomorrow paying for at least some of that.
And that's exactly what I thought. The pay as you go is laudable plan, but it doesn't address all of the future needs of the city. So I ask you this every year. You've looked at our debt loads. Do you have any concerns about them? Would you say that we are at least as good as average, if not better than average, at maintaining a relatively healthy debt load?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, Councillor Hill, I would say yes, absolutely. I have no concerns in terms of our management of it. I think from a cash flow perspective, from an interest rate risk perspective, I don't have any concerns. I do get a report from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs each year that provides us with just some very high level performance indicators across municipalities similar to our size, as well as Southeastern Ontario. We are at the high end of that. So absolutely, we're higher than some of the other municipalities our size. You have to look at that in terms of your capital assets, though, as well. So councils over the past number of years with our debt management strategy have made a conscious decision to use debt to address some of our infrastructure gap that we had at amalgamation. So that was a conscious decision to do that. And so that has put us higher than some other municipalities of similar size to us. But I think also if you look at the investments that we've made in capital and you look at the condition of our capital assets, you have to compare that as well. So we may be a bit higher debt, but as long as our capital assets, the condition of those is also higher, then that certainly offsets it. So you'll also recall the graph I showed, we do project going back down. And I think as we start to come back down, we're not putting a lot of our asset management type things into debt. So those balances will stay down. We will be back in line average with comparable peers of the same size.
And that would be supported, I assume, by the rating, the rating that we received in terms of our financial outlook and stability. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, absolutely, that's correct. They look very closely at our debt and at our projections, and very closely at our capital plans as well. And so, yes, absolutely, the AA has, which again, with those comparable peers, they're around that same level in terms of credit rating as well. So yeah, that is another way that just gives us a bit of confidence that we've got the right strategy in place.
Good, thank you. That's very reassuring. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I have a couple of questions so we can understand where we are with the tree canopy aspect. So maybe I could start with a couple of questions to Commissioner Joyce about work that's already started, that is already costed, that will be coming back, say, to the ITP in the next 12 months, which is also the period of this budget. So we don't, so that we understand what's already being included and so no changes might be needed. So Commissioner Joyce, on the aspect of getting a handle on where our tree canopy is, especially by region of the city, which would address the question of tree equity. Where are we with that? Is there any work underway on sort of mapping out where the tree canopy is, like what the cover is by region of the city?
Commissioner Joyce?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. Yes, so we do have a tree canopy study that was just completed, Councillor Stroud, that we are still waiting to receive the report from that firm. We're expecting to get that over the next few weeks, and then we hope to bring it to our first CITP meeting in the new year. And then, as was indicated in the plan last night, we're intending to come back as well in the fall with a revised forestry management plan. And I'd indicated yesterday that you know, part of that is going to be doing a more frequent survey of the tree canopy to actually be every 2 years instead of the every 7 to 10 years that I believe was originally planned for, to try to better assess how we are making progress towards our tree canopy and to recognize how quickly some of the tree canopy can be lost. And so we need to be able to track that more effectively if we're going to meet the goals of council. So that work is planned for and will be underway in 2022 with intent to come back with a more fulsome plan in the fall.
Right, so no action required by council at this budget meeting when it comes to taking stock of our tree canopy in the sense that we've got a completed study that we still have yet to see that's already been paid for. And of course, that would address some of the points from the delegation about not knowing how much we're losing, say, to development and clear cutting, and how much we're planting. We get numbers at EITP of how many stems get planted per year, but we don't really have because the tree canopy is both, right? It's like a deficit sheet, really. You've got your assets and your losses and your gains, right? Your profits and your gains. So like you've planted some which need to grow, and you've lost some because you've cut some down. The ones you've cut down were mature, so they're not equivalent. I've said that many times, but that's the reason we need just accurate numbers. So that's covered. And then for the hopefully it'll have the data distributed by city, so we would have an idea of the equity, because there is a perception that, for example, north core of the city, so North Kingstown, Kings Court, Rideau, those areas are behind in tree cover is the perception. So we get to see those numbers. And if not, we can focus some tree planting there, which makes a lot of sense. Now to the community tree planting program. So that was new this year, and it sold out. It was very popular. And just to recap for those watching and for council members, so that is selling discounted trees, as other municipalities have also done, to and allowing the labor to be done by the homeowner, and we're giving them the tree at a discount, right? It's not at cost, it's at a discount, because from the numbers I saw, those are cheap. That's cheaper than what you would pay at a nursery, far cheaper than what you would pay at a nursery. Correct. So yeah, so maybe just a quick overview of the program, of what happened in the first year of the program and the target, and whether we met the target and what the target was, and then I'll move on.
Yeah, so the target was 1,000, and it was originally a 3-year program, and it got because of COVID got compressed down to 2 years. So they did 1,000 last year, sold out, and the plan is to go with 1,800, of course, in 2022.
Right, and as far as the cost goes, the cost that we're offering, like, we must take, it's a subsidy, it's a city subsidy. That must cost the city something to offer the trees at that low price.
Yes, it does. Yeah. So we have $100,000 budgeted for 2022.
Okay, great. So here is a very simple way to address the suggestion that we ought to double that program, and that would be just to double the budget. So I have an amendment prepared I've sent to the clerk to increase that budget by 100,000. So that would be doubling it essentially. and the wording the clerk already has. So we'll wait for that. And it's seconded by Councillor Rosanek.
Thank you. So we'll just pause for a moment. We'll wait for that amendment to be displayed. Okay, here we go. So we have a motion to amend, moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Rosanek, that the 2022 municipal capital budget be amended to provide additional funds for trees by increasing the financing from the general municipal reserve fund by $100,000 to change the amount from $59,559,320 to $59,659,320. So the total proposed capital expenditures and total financing are $70,902,320 to planting 3,600 trees. It being understood that less expensive tree species may be selected to achieve this higher target. Okay, Councillor Stroud, you've already sort of spoken to this in your introduction, but it is now on the floor, and so I will restart the clock. You have the floor if there's anything else you want to add.
Sure, I just want to state the rationale for the amendment. It's actually very cost effective to add these funds, and I'll explain why. It's based on the basic cost effective nature of a tree, because a tree grows over time for free, essentially, other than the maintenance required by park staff, for example, in a park. The tree goes from a sapling to a mature tree with a large canopy because of Mother Nature, essentially. So that means that when you plant them as saplings, you pay a certain amount, and they're worth much more when they're mature. Of course, you got to wait for them over time for them to grow. So that's why we plant them in the smaller sizes, but we don't plant them in the tiny little sizes that the CRCA sometimes plants in the outlying areas in the urban core. And the reason for that is because survivability of the larger saplings is much higher. So you don't have to keep going back and replanting ones that have died because you planted them so young. So trees of that caliper size, if you were to do it privately, would cost several $100s each for each tree, right? And plus the cost of the labor and the transportation from the nursery and so on. So it's a great partnership to do with the city, because the city has all that transportation and ordering by bulk already in place. So the numbers that we're seeing there, that 100,000 to be done in this way is the most cost-effective way we can plant these trees, because the labor is free and the trees are much cheaper done this way than any other way, and so the bang for the buck is the highest. So that's it's an extra 100,000. It's an ambitious tree planting goal, but wherever we are with our canopy, judging by the fact that this sold out so quickly in its first year in a pandemic, I'm very confident we can reach the target of 3,600, and I feel confident that the money would be very well spent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment? Councillor Rosanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I support this amendment. So besides what Councillor Stroud has just said, we did want to do the tree planting starting in 2020, and because of COVID, we had to delay it. So the trees that private residents would have planted on their front lawn during that time have already lost like 1 year's worth of growth. So we're trying to play catch up with this as well. We've seen a lot of development applications involving trees that have already been cut down or will, and also even trees being cut down on our employment lands off of Resources Road. There is a large swath next to Frulek that got clear cut earlier in the spring of 2021. So this isn't going to get us, equal to the number of trees lost throughout the city, but it will help a little bit towards the catch up of the tree loss. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the amendment? Councillor Doherty.
Just thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say that I also support this. The amendment in front of us is clearly has gone through staff, and obviously it can fit in our budget, so it's a doable amendment. And we definitely have lost a lot of trees also through disease, and we heard the presentation today. It's this great way of bringing the community together. It's extremely important. It's not just trees. We heard the benefits of trees tonight. It's so much more. So I'm happy to support this. Thanks for the.
Okay, next is Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, through your worship. My question is actually to staff. This is more of a mathematical question. The new number that's listed, adding the $100,000, does that account for the removal of the additional $75,000 that was double budgeted in the planning and the heritage report? Has that been removed, or is that still in there?
Yes, it does. So the clerks actually have been working to make sure that they were using the updated number. So yes, it does.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, hang on. Sorry. I blanked out all of you. No ill will intended. This bad mechanics. Okay, so my first question is to the mover and the seconder. Perhaps I missed this. It's been a long haul, right? Will the plantings be done by the organization, and will it be on?
So Councillor Hutchison, I'm not going to open up that box because this is just a budget amendment. So the only thing that can really be in order is the dollar value on the amendment. So I don't think it's appropriate to get into all of the operational details. I think that's something that obviously can be followed up on, but not in a budget discussion.
You mean the effectiveness of the spending of the money is not a budget issue? Come on. And all I want to do is have clarity.
That's the question.
I'm not going to belabor this. I just want to, and I'm kind of partial to it, but I think sometimes we need to ask these questions. Okay. So I just want to be sure I understood what the amendment, which was, I think, flashed up and I didn't quite get a chance to read it. Right, what's involved? People came in and got trees before and they planted them, Councillor Sands, there in the front yards, but anyway, on their property. So I'm just curious if we're continuing that, and is that the central idea? And I'm asking the mover in second.
Well, I wonder if the question is better directed to staff, on the beat program. Sure. So
whoever.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. Yeah, Councillor Hutchison, the idea is that the trees are provided to the residents, and the residents look after planting those trees.
Right. Okay, so does staff foresee any logistical issues with distributing these extra trees?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I can really answer that. I don't have that experience to be able to, I think, fully answer that question, though I'm happy to follow up at a later date for you if you'd like some more information regarding that.
See, Ms.
Santucci, would you like to jump in on this one?
Yep, sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. The trees that came in were housed in an area and distributed through our staff. I don't think there was a huge logistical issue that was associated with getting those trees out to the homeowners.
So I'm talking about the increase. We're doubling it here.
Sorry?
We're doubling the number of trees. Really the essence of my question.
So I think that Ms. Santucci is saying that given the way that the program operates, that there's no foreseeable problem with operating the double. I want to put words in your mouth, but Ms. Santucci, is that fair?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. So my final question is the source of the funds. Are we just adding to a line, or I mean, we're changing the budget here, so I'm just wondering what the source of the funds is. We're not at.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
Fund, or what
I didn't hear that question. Can you just repeat that question?
Oh, my question. Mm-hmm. My question is, when we've had amendments like this in the past, or any time at council, we usually say, and this will be funded from, say, the working fund reserve, because we didn't anticipate the expenditure. I mean, I don't think it'll make or break us either way, but it would be.
So I think that the motion to amend does specify it. Ms. Kennedy?
Yes, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So yeah, we did roll the recommendation up, and before the final vote is done, we actually are going to just revise the wording slightly, because you're right, Councillor, it doesn't actually say the Municipal Capital Reserve Fund. But what we did is we took the wording from the actual report recommendation, and the recommendation does not show the specific capital funds. It just shows general municipal reserve funds. So that's the piece that we actually changed. So it will be coming out of the Municipal Capital Reserve Fund, which is where the tree program currently is, that's in the budget. So we're just increasing that program by $100,000.
I think that's just fine. I'm going to vote for this.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Oosterhoff.
So just to be clear, is this going to add to our budget, or is it coming out of an existing fund?
So maybe I'll have Ms. Kennedy explain, but it's coming out of a reserve fund, so it's not going to affect the tax rate.
Okay.
But it will affect the overall budget number. Ms. Kennedy, is that a fair description?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is accurate.
Okay, so it's not an increase in the tax burden of the city at this time.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this? Okay, so we will call the vote. Then all those, oh, I'm sorry. We're just going to put the amendment up one more time just so everyone can see it. Okay, so with that, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, Councillor Stroud, it's back to you. You have 42 seconds left on the clock if there's anything else you want to say in this round. Councillor Stroud, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, I'll just sum up by saying that this is my 7th budget, and I've seen an evolution of the budgetary process over time. I was quite concerned in my first budget of the perception in the public that there wasn't a whole lot of control at the council table for the budgetary process. But I'm seeing over time that we're learning how to do that, and staff is being very helpful and anticipating many things and coming. It's been said by others tonight, and I'd like to echo that sentiment that this is a pretty impressive budget under the circumstances, and the process itself, which I once thought needed outright reform, I'm starting to think we just need to continue to learn how to do it effectively. Thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers on my list. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Yeah, just a quick question, and I'm harkening back to, I believe, the beginning of the term when we first came up with the idea of the gradual decrease over the 4 years of this term of council on the tax rate, which brings us to where we are, and staff has taken that direction. And I agree with all the comments that have been said, that the budget before us is remarkable in the sense that it covers council's priorities really well, helps us advance toward pandemic recovery, etc. And I'm happy to support it. The question I have is that when we were talking about that decision, we were in a very different context, but the context we were in at the time was that the provincial government had reduced its proportion of funding for public health. And we heard from, I believe, the CAO at the time, or interim CAO, I'm not sure where we were, but that if there were any further changes coming from the provincial government that would have negative impacts, that we would have to reevaluate that stepping down of the tax rate. So I see in the budget that there is about 4 million decrease, and I know that it's for a variety of reasons. It's not, and some of it related to post-pandemic realities. But I just wanted to get, I see CEO Hurdles there, just to get her thoughts on that and any forthcoming changes from the province that would negatively impact us at this point.
CEO Hurdles.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. So you're correct, Councillor Holland, that when we had discussions with council at the beginning of the term, we had looked at a gradual decrease in tax rate, but there were some, I believe, some conditions that were attached to that. And one of them was we were going to be able to achieve this decrease as long as we didn't see any significant changes in levels of funding from other levels of government. So you're right, there were a number of things that were in the works before the pandemic, public health primarily. But I would say, looking at moving forward, the things that we know are going to continue to impact us will be around social services and housing. That one we're pretty solid in terms of the information that we have, the decrease that will start in 2023 of 1.2 million in social services. And with housing, of course, it's the ongoing step down funding of the federal government. And those are pretty significant amounts. Social services may be more than that over time, depending on how the province decides to redesign the services. So there could be additional impacts there for sure. And I think that's the area probably that we would see the most significant impact. Unless I'm missing something, and I would definitely look to our CFO if I am missing anything significant, but I think that's probably, those are the areas of main concerns with reduction of level of funding from other provincial or federal government.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to speak before we call the vote? Councillor Neuter.
Just quickly, if we can separate the library budget when we get to the final vote, so I can vote with my conscience. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Neil, just so I'm understanding, so you want to vote against the entire library budget? Is that right?
I believe that under the Library Act, that's our only option. That's my only option.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Deputy Mayor, would you take the chair?
I will, and I recognize you.
It's late. It's our third night of budget, so I'm going to make this really quick. I just want to make sure that we recognize what an excellent budget this is that's before us tonight. I mean, moving into 2022, all the pandemic funding and support that we were getting from levels of government is gone. And all of our revenues from transit and parking and recreation services are not back up to 100%. So staff, I think, have done a heroic job trying to bridge that gap between our expenses and our revenues and still move forward with all of council's priorities and come in with a budget of 2.1%. So I know that I had said on the first night that I think the growth was a big reason why. We are coming in with one of the lowest property tax rate increases of any city or size in the province. But I also think that we need to recognize the incredible work the staff have put in over the last number of months to project and control costs and to be able to manage a $400 million budget very well. So, I say this sincerely, and I know that I speak on behalf of council, just how much I appreciate the work the staff have done on this budget. Thank you.
I return the chair to you, Mayor Patterson.
Thank you. Now, I know that everybody is like itching to just kind of get out of here, but we do need to take a bit of a break just to double check our numbers. I would hate if there was a mistake to have to call you all back and have to do a revote. So I'm going to propose that we take just to make sure, especially with Councillor Neal's direction to trying to separate out the library budget, if we take a 10-minute to prepare the budget for the voting, and then we'll be able to get that underway. So we will reconvene at 9:10. Folks, I'm just checking it. It's 9:10, but our finance folks are still working on separating out the library budget. So we need an extra few minutes. So let's reconnect at 9:15. Okay, folks, we are almost there. It's just going to take a minute or two for the clerks to get the numbers and the amendments prepared. So, so let's just sit. Hey, Councillor Neal.
I apologize. I didn't realize this was going to take 20 minutes, or I would have given a heads up earlier. If it's okay with the mayor, I'll give the couple of minutes preamble, and then when it comes back, we can vote. I don't expect this to lose, but I want to explain why I'm choosing not to vote for it.
Well, so Councillor Neal, then it's best that you do that. It's best that you do that now.
Yeah.
As once we get into voting, then we just do a series of votes. So the
that would be good.
So
thank you.
Feel free.
I was on the library board for over 20 years, including, in fact, I'm sorry, I'll get rid of my dog. So here I am again. And I was a teacher librarian, and I served on SOLS, which is the provincial library board, and I was chair there as well. And I never thought there'd ever come a day when I would choose to vote against a library budget. I am troubled by the fact that it may not be reducing staff now, but clearly we've all received emails from the librarians there. And clearly this was not a kind of negotiated thing. And I think it's going to really sour relationship between workers and the library. And we may all in Kingston pay a price for that in the next series of negotiations. So for that reason, and with a great amount of reluctance, I will be voting against that. And I think we should keep in mind, when I asked, is this a pilot project? The response was, well, in future, we may find other branches that we can apply the same policy to. And I think that really devalues librarians to say that we can, you don't have to be here. We'll just lock the doors, but we'll give people passes to come in. And I mean, the reason we go to libraries often is to interact with librarians, to ask questions. And so for that reason, I will not be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I just wanted to kind of follow that up, seeing as the library expansion's been brought up with this motion, and basically just argue that, you know, this is the library board's decision, not really ours. So you can't pull different things out of this budget, obviously. So we're basically going to vote for this. On the flip side of that, I've had emails from those in support, those against. It's time and change. COVID's proven that. We're doing a meeting by Zoom right now using technology as opposed to sitting somewhere that we've done for so long. Libraries are going to shift as well. We don't want to make them irrelevant by being so hidebound that we can't actually accept that they're going to adapt and change. My understanding of this is that it's a stopgap measure to expand hours, which have long been, wanted over in the Pittsburgh district. And it's not actually an effort to reduce staff. It's just trying to expand those hours in the meantime with a plan to expand the branch and hire more staff. So I'm going to vote for the budget. I hope everybody else says. I understand Councillor Neal's concerns, but I know, change is hard and things change. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just one moment. I'm just going to check in with, okay, Councillor Kiley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you, I just want to build on that and offer perspective as the council member on the library board in regards to Councillor Neal's very good concerns about the nature of a pilot project. And I would just offer to council for your consideration that one of the advantages of collecting local data is to see how if in the future this could be applied, it would be applied effectively, particularly to underserviced branches. So not only that in Councillor Boehm's district, where we see about 2/3 of the hours compared to the main branches in the urban center, but for the rural reaches of our larger region, because the library board, like public health, like conservation authority, is impacting a number of municipalities. We, for example, Cloyne or Plevna, or places that only have 6 hours a week, potentially being able to expand services there. So what we do now in hopefully supporting this could bear fruit for people who have very limited, almost non-existent access to services. So thanks for that.
Thank you. So I believe that the clerks are now ready to go. So I'm going to hand it over to the deputy clerk to walk us through the votes step by step.
Councillor Osterhoff, you are excused for the first vote. Okay, this is with respect to the Kingston Access Bus Services, that council approved the 2022 general municipal operating budget for agencies and boards, Kingston Access Services, in the amount of $3,488,122, and that council approved the 2022 municipal capital budget for Kingston Access Services in the amount total of $561,600 as follows. Financing of $561,600. General municipal reserve funds pay as you go, $561,600 for total financing of $561,600.
Those in favor? And
Councillor Osterhoff, you can return. This next budget vote is for the separation of the library board. That council approved the 2022 general municipal operating budget for agencies and boards, library board in the amount of $8,287,881, and that council approved the 2022 municipal capital budget for library board in the amount total of $390,000 as follows. Proposed capital expenditures, $390,000. Financing general municipal reserve funds pay as you go, $380,000. Contributions from others, $10,000. Total financing of $390,000.
Point of order.
Your worship, I actually thought I had turned on my camera for the last vote, but I turned it off, and then so I missed it. This is we'll be voting again in the future, correct?
Yeah.
When we come out of
this is going to have to be confirmed at council.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you very much. Sorry, I now have my camera on.
So now we will call the vote then on the library board budget. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries by a vote of 11-2. Councillor Neal and Stroud opposed.
The next vote is on the remainder of the capital and operating budget, with the exception of the final clause of the recommendation, which we will vote on next. That council approved the 2022 general municipal tax supported operating budget in the amount of $396,296,630, which is $408,072,633 less $3,488,122 and $8,287,881. And that any variance between final assessment growth and the growth estimates included in the 2022 general municipal operating budget be transferred to, funded from the working fund reserve to offset unanticipated variances in assessment growth in future years as a stabilization measure. And that council approved the 2022 municipal capital budget as follows. Proposed capital expenditures, $69,950,720. Financing from the general municipal reserve fund pay as you go, $58,617,720. Working fund reserve, $175,000. Government grants, $10,432,640. Contributions from others, $725,360. Total financing of $69,950,720. And that council received the following provided as part of the budget documentation. A, 15-year capital expenditure forecast. B, capital works in progress listing as at September 30th, 2021. C, municipal reserve fund schedules of continuity. And that the city treasurer be authorized to include the approved budget estimates for 2022 in accordance with Public Sector Accounting Board PSAB reporting requirements as an attachment to the bylaw.
All those in favor? Oh. That carries by 12 to 1. Councillor Chappelle opposed.
For our final vote, Councillor Osterhoff and Councillor Bohm are excused. That the necessary bylaws be established to formally adopt these estimates and be given all 3 readings at the December 21, 2021 meeting of council.
Opposed. And that's 3. Okay, folks, with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, second by Councillor Bohm. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.